Chapter 1694. Thus, the next day, Noah immediately announced to the members of Fairy Tale that Shwed and I would take Gadgelu's place today. As for Gadgelu, he would stay in the hotel to rest. Regarding this, Gadgelu was extremely unwilling, but in the end, he couldn't go against everyone's opinion. He could only lie on the bed with a sullen expression, refusing to make a sound, just like a child throwing a tantrum. Because of this, Alusha also made a last-minute decision to let Naz rest in the hotel and let Elfman appear as a substitute member of team. Naturally, Naz also resisted with all his might, making more noise than Gadgelu, but in the end he was knocked down by Alusha with a single punch and became completely silent. Just like that, a group of Fairy Tale magic shooters arrived at the dome, and just like yesterday, they were divided into the contestant group and the spectator group, entering the venue from two different paths. Perhaps it was because enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road, but today, Noah's group also met a certain degree of archenemy. Saber-Tooth's group, who had just entered the passageway for the contestants, immediately stopped in their tracks when they saw Fairy Tale's group. Their expressions turned solemn. This was especially so for Sting, Logue, Lucius, and Olga. When they saw Noah walking at the head of the group, not only did their faces darken, there was even a hint of fear in their eyes. Under such circumstances, Noah noticed another person. A girl who was leading Sting, Logue, Lucius, and Olga's group. She was obviously the leader of the group, and was dressed in a somewhat flamboyant manner. Seeing this girl, Xuanai cried out in surprise. "Miss Xuanai." Maniba turned her gaze and cast it on Xuanai, and a smile that reminded people of a poisonous snake appeared on her face. "I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few days, you would actually betray us. Xuanai, this choice of yours is not very wise." "No." The surprise on Xuanai's face slowly disappeared and was replaced by her usual unswerving determination. "I think this is the best choice I have made in my life." "Oh." Maniba obviously didn't expect Xuanai to refute her like this. She was a little surprised and sneered. "You've changed a little, although these changes are a little stupid." Xuanai ignored Maniba's mockery and looked straight at her. "Today, I will be a substitute member of Fairy Tale B. If I have a chance to go on stage, I won't lose Mississippi." Hearing this, Maniba's face sank. That was to be expected. Until yesterday, Xuanai was still a member of Saber-Tooth. After losing to Noah in yesterday's match, she joined Fairy Tale today and entered the competition as a member of Fairy Tale. If that happened, what would others think? Others would definitely think so. Looks like that contestant called UNI thinks that with the strength of Saber-Tooth, there's no way to beat Fairy Tale. That's why she joined Fairy Tale, right? Although people with discerning eyes would definitely be able to see some clues, but people are creatures that subconsciously believe what they see as reality, so there will definitely be many people who think so. If that was the case, then the reputation of Saber-Tooth would be completely ruined. So that's how it is. Maniba turned to look at Noah and said sarcastically, "As expected of Fairy Tale, what a good move." Maniba thought that Noah deliberately let Xuanai go on stage to create this situation. Noah didn't want to explain. He just met Maniba's gaze and smiled. "Your guild leader of Saber-Tooth originally planned to expel Xuanai from a guild. Since that is the case, who do you think should be blamed for this situation? Father is indeed too impulsive and arrogant." Maniba shrugged and smiled. "But this is how our strongest guild does things." Hearing Maniba's words, Noah raised his eyebrows, took a step forward, leaned in front of Maniba, and said softly, "So your so-called title as the strongest guild won't last long." Maniba's flirtatious smile suddenly froze. After leaving this sentence, Noah glanced at Sting, Roger, Lucifer, and Olga. Under the four people's fearful gazes, he lightly said to his companions, "Okay, let's go in." With that, Noah led the crowd into the venue. Maniba's eyes flickered as she stared at Noah's receding figure. Looking at Maniba, Sting asked tentatively, "Young miss?" "I'm fine." Maniba took a deep breath and said seriously, "Is he no Adol?" She asked, is indeed quite difficult to deal with. This man is too powerful, Lucifer said in a low voice. If we don't have a way to deal with him, I think it will be very difficult for us to win. Don't worry, I have as many ways to deal with a man as I want. Maniba smiled coldly. After all, an individual with great strength can become the best soldier and the best general. However, if one wants to become the best king, strength alone is not enough. I'll show him. Maniba licked her lips, her eyes shining with a vicious light. It's a battle style that belongs to kings. Oh, the loud cheers seemed to never stop. With the enthusiasm of the audience, they constantly reverberated in the air above the venue. Today, the dome, Flattenberg, was still full. The audience was everywhere, and it was very lively. Taking a closer look, there were actually people in the audience who started to raise the banner of fairy tale, cheering for fairy tale. Under such circumstances, on the platform, Chapati raised a microphone and expanded his voice to the entire venue. Ladies and gentlemen, now, it is finally the third day of our Great Demon Battle Arts competition. Today, what kind of wonderful performances will the 8 participating teams bring us? Even I, Chapati Laura, am looking forward to it. Along with Chapati's voice, a projection magic crystal unfolded in the air above the venue, reflecting the current rankings of the 8 participating teams. Among them, Team A and Team B, which belonged to Fairy Tale, firmly occupied the first place. The audience holding the flag of Fairy Tale and cheering for Fairy Tale collectively cheered. As we can see, currently, the 2 teams of Fairy Tale occupy the first and second place respectively. However, the difference in points between them and the other teams is not very big. It is entirely possible that they will be overtaken. After today, what kind of changes will occur in the rankings of the major guilds? Let's wait and see. Then, let's begin the third day of the Great Demon Battle Arts competition, Demon Subduing Hall. Chapati began to announce. Every team, please send a contestant to participate in the competition of Demon Subduing Hall. Noah looked at the projection magic crystal in the center of the venue and fell into deep thought. What? You don't know who to send? Laxus asked. If it's necessary, it's not a problem to send me. Mira, Snow, and Julian all looked at Noah. Under the gazes of his companions, Noah raised his head and spoke calmly. No, let me go. Chapter 1695. You, Mira, Yukino, Jubian, and Laxus all looked at Noah in surprise. Noah nodded under everyone's gaze. In yesterday's competition, our team A and B didn't get many points. Although we barely managed to stay at the top of the leaderboard because of the duels, it's just like what the report said. The gap between us and the other teams isn't that big. We could be overtaken at any time. So, I'll be the one in today's competition. Hearing this, Mira, Jubian, and Laxus fell in a deep thought. That, Yukino said guiltily. I'm really sorry. It's all my fault. Obviously, Yukino was concerned about Noah's words. After all, on the first day of the competition, Yukino was the one who defeated both teams. At that time, you weren't a member of our guild. Naturally, you had to do your best to get points for your guild. So, don't feel guilty about it. Noah patted Yukino's shoulder and walked past everyone into the competition venue. Then, I'll be right back. Be careful, Mira reminded him. Don't do anything rash. Noah raised a hand, indicating that they didn't need to worry. Then he walked into the venue. At the same time, the other teams also decided on their candidates. Good. Every team has decided on their contestants. Chapati reported loudly. Let's see what kind of contestants the 8 teams sent out. Raven Tail has sent out contestant Obra. Sabertooth sent out contestant Aliga. Mermaid Heel has sent out contestant Miliana. Blue Pegasus has sent out a loud contestant. Lamia Scale sent out contestant Kra. Cotter Cerberus sent out contestant Nobali. Fairy Tale has sent out contestant Alusha. Finally, the player that Fairy Tale be sent out is actually player Noah. Chapati couldn't help but raise his voice. Could it be that we're lucky enough to see that kind of terrifying power that's beyond the scope of human beings today? The audience suddenly burst into cheers. Clearly, the power that Noah had displayed yesterday was still vivid in the minds of those who had witnessed it with their own eyes. The kind of power that did not seem to belong to humans. Would he be lucky enough to witness it again today? Everyone was looking forward to it, but they were also uneasy. At the same time, they felt extremely excited. Thus, flags with the emblem of fairy tale were continuously raised in the audience seats. There were even couplets painted with eye-catching paint, and the words marked on the horizontal couplet were a name: Noah Dole. Seeing this scene, Noah didn't know what kind of expression to make. He could only helplessly smile. Elisha, who had unknowingly appeared beside Noah, also smiled and said, "It seems that after yesterday, many people have become your fans." "I can see that." Noah shrugged. "I hope that this popularity will bring a lot of commissions and business to our guild in the future." Elisha couldn't help but laugh. The 8 contestants immediately gathered in the middle of the venue. Then, Jilla took a step forward and looked at Noah with an unyielding smile on his rock-like face. "I can fight with you again. I hope that in the arena, I can at least take back some ground from you." It was clear that yesterday, Noah had easily defeated Jilla with less than 1% of his power. Jilla's speech didn't suffer a blow to this Saint Magus. It was better to say that after understanding the gap between him and Noah, Jilla was like a young man who didn't want to admit defeat. "I won't lose either." Mariana raised her hand and giggled. "Whether it's little Elu or little Noah, don't think that you can easily beat me." Noah and Elisha both smiled and nodded. Apart from Jilla and Mariana, the others weren't so optimistic. Olga, in particular, still looked at Noah with a trace of fear in his eyes. Then, let the demon subduing hall competition begin. At this time, the pumpkin referee jumped out of nowhere and raised his hands high. "Let's welcome our venue demon subduing hall." As soon as his voice fell, clang, in the sky above the venue, a purplish-black radiance suddenly flickered without any warning, illuminating the entire dome of the Frobird. Everyone present raised their heads and looked at the sky. There, a huge purple-black magic array suddenly rotated and covered the sky above the venue. Immediately after, along with a wave of mana, a gigantic darkness shrine slowly emerged from the purplish-black magic array. It descended from the sky and landed heavily in the direction of the venue below. Boom! After a loud sound, the huge temple of darkness fell on the ground of the venue, setting off a gust of wind and dust. The ground shook slightly, shocking many people. Everyone looked at the huge temple of darkness in amazement. Under such circumstances, the pumpkins started giggling. "What you see now is our demon subduing hall, which is also your next arena." Saying such a sentence, the pumpkin's tone became dangerous. Of course, that's not an ordinary arena. Just like its name, Demon Subduing Hall, there are a total of 100 monsters in this temple of darkness. There are 100 monsters in there. All the contestants were shocked. Even Noah couldn't help but raise his head and look at the demon subduing hall in front of him, frowning slightly. He didn't expect the kingdom to capture monsters and bring them to the venue as part of a competition. If the captured monsters went berserk and rushed out of the demon subduing hall, it would be no laughing matter. Could it be that the kingdom was so reckless because there were so many high mages from the guilds here? There was also a slight commotion in the surrounding audience, faintly feeling uneasy. Well, everyone don't worry. Those aren't real monsters. They're just substitutes that we've materialized using magic. The pumpkin seemed to want to reassure everyone, waving her hand. So, the monsters definitely won't rush out of the demon subduing hall to hurt people. Please don't worry. Hearing this, the surrounding audience breathed a sigh of relief in unison. However, the group of magic shooters exclaimed in amazement because of this. For the sake of a competition, the kingdom had actually gone to such great lengths to materialize 100 monsters using magic. It wouldn't be a big deal if they were just ordinary monsters. However, if they were placed in front of the elite magic shooters of so many outstanding guilds, those monsters definitely wouldn't be low-leveled, right? If Shifeng summoned 100 of these monsters, Just how many magic crystals would he have to burn to cover the cost of his mana consumption? For the sake of a competition, the kingdom was actually willing to spend so much. How rich and overbearing. Thinking about it carefully, for the first day of the competition, the organizers had similarly used a town as a venue. The mana consumption was similarly frightening. In the end, with such a consumption, how much mana would the cost of a single great demon battle exhibition be? The organizers were truly rich and overbearing. The group of magic shooters sighed emotionally. Only Noah narrowed his eyes slightly. In Noah's opinion, no matter what, the kingdom couldn't possibly burn such a large sum of money every year for the sake of an entertainment festival. Unless, of course, the kingdom had other motives. Or perhaps the mana that was consumed was actually the mana that was unknowingly absorbed from the archmages during the previous great demon combat exercises. In other words, the mana absorption that Noah had felt before was very likely the kingdom's doing. The kingdom. Noah raised his head and looked in the direction of the palace. I hope you won't do anything to make me unhappy. Noah didn't notice. While he was looking in the direction of the palace, a shadow quietly appeared in a corner of the venue. Chapter 1696. Just as Noah was looking thoughtfully at the palace's location, the explanation of the competition's content began. We've divided the 100 monsters into 5 grades: S, A, B, C, and D. According to the grades, the number and strength of the monsters are also different. Pumpkin raised a finger. Among them, there are 50 D-class monsters, 30 C-class monsters, 15 B-class monsters, 4 A-class monsters, and only 1 S-class monster, which is the highest level, Feng Luo said. All the contestants need to do is draw lots. Then, according to the order of the lots drawn, everyone will enter the demon subduing hall. Pumpkin raised a second finger. However, before entering the demon subduing hall, the contestants need to confirm how many monsters they want to challenge. Once they've confirmed, the demon subduing hall will have the same number of monsters as the contestant's choice, but the monsters' grades will be random. After that, the contestants can enter the demon subduing hall and challenge the monsters. No matter what the monster's grade is, each monster defeated will be counted as 1 point. Only after defeating all the monsters of their choice will they be able to exit the demon subduing hall. At this point, Pumpkin raised a third finger. There's one thing to note, and that is, if a contestant is defeated in the process of challenging the demon subduing hall, then in this round of challenges, no matter how many monsters they defeat, their points will return to 0. Unless they've successfully obtained points when they entered the demon subduing hall, they can only be eliminated with 0 points. Finally, according to everyone's points, we'll come up with a ranking. Pumpkin seemed to kindly remind them. By the way, although there's only 1 S-grade monster, according to the strength we've set, that monster has a strength that even the 10 great saint magicians may not be able to defeat. This sentence caused everyone's eyebrows to rise. At the same time, they had a deeper admiration for the palace's wealth. If even a monster comparable to the 10 great saint magicians was conjured, then the magic power required would undoubtedly be several levels higher. There's more. There's more. Don't think that the lowest grade D monster is weak. Pumpkin snickered mischievously. According to our settings, even if it's a D rank monster, it still has the strength to single-handedly defeat the elite magic shooters of your guild. As for C rank monsters, it will be doubled. As for B rank monsters, it will be doubled. Just like that until S rank. If you aren't careful and die in the demon subduing hall, our guild won't be responsible. Pumpkin. The 8 magic shooters looked at each other, and many of them even had a solemn expression on their faces. Unlike yesterday and the day before, today's competition already had life-threatening factors. Moreover, the rules were quite complicated. Players would take turns to enter Demon Smiting Hall based on the order of the lots drawn. Before entering, players would also have to choose the number of monsters they needed to challenge, allowing the corresponding monsters to appear in Demon Smiting Hall. However, the monsters' levels were random. In addition, if one was knocked down during the challenge process, they would be eliminated. The challenge points of that round would also be reset to 0. Unless one had already entered the demon smiting hall and successfully knocked down a number of monsters they had chosen to obtain points. Otherwise, their points would be 0. In other words, if they were unlucky and encountered an S-rank monster in the first round and were defeated, then they would definitely be in 8th place. Unless the 8 contestants are defeated, they will take turns to enter Demon Smiting Hall until all 100 monsters in Demon Smiting Hall are defeated or all 8 contestants are defeated and eliminated. Only then will it be considered over. Pumpkin suddenly pulled out a box. Then, let's start drawing lots now. Hearing that, the 8 contestants looked at each other, but none of them chose to step forward. Obviously, no one wanted to be the first to stand out. Seeing that everyone else was watching, Noah sighed and stepped forward. Since that's the case, then let me go first. Everyone's gaze immediately gathered on Noah. In front of everyone, Noah walked in front of Pumpkin. Looking at the box, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart. Now, I don't have any ability points anymore, and I've also lost the skill that increases luck. I wonder how my luck is now. Muttering this, Noah reached into the box and pulled out a lot. In the next moment, the corners of Noah's mouth lifted slightly. Looks like my luck isn't bad. On Noah's lot, there was a 1 written on it. Hey. Contestant Noah is the first challenger. Pumpkin hugged the box and walked in the direction of the other contestants. Next contestant, please draw lots. However, as soon as those words left his mouth, Noah suddenly spoke. No need to draw. Huh? Pumpkin's footsteps stopped. No need to draw? The others were stunned on the spot. Noah tossed aside the lot in his hand, raised his foot, and walked in the direction of Demon Subduing Hall as he spoke indifferently. Didn't I say that the competition would be over after all 100 monsters in the Demon Subduing Hall were defeated? Then there's no need to draw lots, right? At first, everyone had a confused expression. However, after a while, everyone immediately understood the meaning of Noah's words and opened their eyes wide. Before the challenge, I have to choose the number of monsters to challenge first, right? Noah didn't stop walking, but his voice echoed clearly in everyone's ears. In that case, all 100 monsters belong to me. After saying that, Noah walked into the dark divine hall called the Demon Subduing Hall under everyone's shocked gazes. About a minute later, kaboom! Amidst a deafening roar, the huge divine palace of darkness suddenly exploded, setting off an extremely terrifying burst of wind and flames. Mixed with debris, it swept across the entire venue. The audience could only stare blankly as the Demon Subduing Hall, which was as fragile as paper, exploded piece by piece. It turned into fragments and scattered all over the ground. Then, it disappeared under the blast of wind and flames without leaving a trace. The hat on their heads and the snacks in their hand were blown away by the blast of wind and waves. They didn't even have time to react. When everyone finally reacted, Noah's figure slowly appeared in the scorching blast of flames. He floated down from midair and landed on the ground. Noah raised his head and looked at the audience in a daze. He shrugged and said, "Don't worry, I won't be able to win." What? Do you still want to continue? The entire venue suddenly fell silent. Oh! In the next second, the cheers that resounded throughout the venue burst out like a huge wave. Do you still want to continue? Of course, there's no need to continue. Even Chapati was ignited as he announced loudly with great excitement. Noah Doria won first place in the Demon Subduing Hall competition. Without a doubt, he's first place. The audience stood up one by one and couldn't stop cheering. They shouted until their veins were bulging, but they still didn't have any self-awareness. The cheers reverberated and shook the air in the entire venue. As for the other 7 contestants, they looked at each other in dismay and smiled bitterly at each other. Really? Alusha looked at Noah, who was standing in the center of the venue, and her eyes became extremely gentle. I can't compare to that guy at all. Noah seemed to feel Alusha's gaze. He turned his head and waved his hand. Seeing this, Alusha's eyes became even gentler. The magic shooters from the other guilds also couldn't help but smile bitterly in the audience and contestant area. They also offered the highest level of applause to Noah. At this moment, there were only two people who were sincerely unhappy with Noah's performance. One was in the contestant area of Sabretooth. There, Magneba's face was gloomy, and even her eyes were full of hostility. The other was in the contestant area of Raventail. Alexei stared at Noah, who was bathed in the cheers of the audience. He clenched his fists and squeezed out an extremely resentful voice from under his mask. Damn it, why is that guy so strong? At this moment, a black shadow appeared behind Alexei. Who is it? Alexei turned his head abruptly and looked behind him. Then, Alexei heard such an incomparably evil voice. I'm the one who gave you hope. Chapter 1697. In the end, because of Noah's activity, the third day of the Great Demonic Battle Arts Exhibition turned into a one-man show. However, the points of the competition mainly came from the rankings. Even if Noah took on 100 monsters and won first place in the competition, the rest of the contestants still needed to determine who was better. However, even the kingdom could not continue to create 100 monsters in a short period of time for the contestants to challenge. Therefore, without any other choice, the organizers could only temporarily decide to use a small test to determine the rankings of the remaining 7 teams. The content of the test was based on the magic of each team's sorcerer. The team with higher magic would be able to obtain a higher ranking. In the end, Noah won first place without any controversy. In the competition, the rankings of each team and the points they obtained, in order of highest to lowest, were as follows: Frowny Face Fairy Tale B Team, 10p. Lamia's Scale, 8p. Fairy Tale A Team, 6p. Sabretooth, 4p. Mermaid Heel, 3p. Cotter Cerberus, 2p. Blue Pegasus, 1p. Raventail, 0p. After that, there were 4 more duels. The first duel, Mermaid Heel's Miriana versus Cotter Cerberus's Symes. Miriana won and obtained 10 points for Mermaid Heel. The second match was between Sabretooth's Lucifer and Blue Pegasus Ibu. Lucifer was victorious and earned 10 points for Sabretooth. The third duel, Lax's from Fairy Tale B Team versus Raventail's Alix. Lax's won and obtained 10 points for Fairy Tale B Team. The fourth match was between Winnie from Fairy Tale A and Shalia from Lamia Scales. The two sides were tied, and each of them won 5 points for their respective teams. After 1 duel and 4 duels, each team's ranking had a small change. The changes were as follows. First place, Fairy Tale B Team, 44p. Second place, Fairy Tale A Team, 37p. Third place, Sabretooth, 34p. Fourth place, Mermaid Heel, 30p. Fifth place, Lamia Scale, 25p. Sixth place, Raventail, 24p. Seventh place, Blue Pegasus, 16p. Eighth place, Cotter Cerberus, 12p. At this point, the third day of the Great Demon Battle Exhibition had smoothly ended. Fairy Tale's 2 teams had successfully maintained their position as the top 2 teams. Especially Team B, there was a 10-point gap between them and the third-place team, Sabretooth. If Sabretooth wanted to chase after him, he would have to put in a lot of effort. No matter what, today was still Fairy Tale's victory. A group of Fairy Tale sorcerers were chatting and laughing as they walked out of the giant egg. They walked towards the direction of the hotel. At the back of the group, Noah lowered his head and fell into deep thought. His eyebrows were tightly knitted. Mira, who was keenly aware of Noah's abnormality, hugged Noah's arm and gently said, "What are you thinking about?" Hearing this, Noah did not hide anything and directly said it. "I'm thinking about the Raventail." With this, his companions who were chatting and laughing around him also quieted down. It wasn't strange for everyone to have such a reaction. The reason was actually very simple. It was because Raventail did something that puzzled everyone. Laxus narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Are you thinking about why those guys directly forfeited in the competition?" This was a reason why Noah fell into deep thought. Today, Raventail's performance was too abnormal. Whether it was in the competition or the duel, Raventail's contestants directly forfeited and did not get any points. As a result, Raventail naturally fell from 3rd place to 6th place. This behavior was too abnormal. Originally, Noah did not care about Raventail at all. During the Great Demonic Combat Arts competition, he let them do whatever they wanted. Because, in Noah's opinion, Ivan's tricks were too childish and ridiculous. Once Ivan made a move, Noah only had to take care of him, and this guild with bad intentions would be doomed eternally. But today, Raventail actually forfeited twice without hesitation, which made Noah a little suspicious. "I have a feeling," Noah said in a low voice. "Ivan might be planning to make a move." The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. His companions all gathered around Noah, and even their footsteps stopped. "Could it be just your imagination?" Grace said. "It's just forfeiting. Maybe those guys feel that they have no chance of winning. Winning isn't important to those guys at all." Noah shook his head. "Those fellows' true target is us, or rather, our guild. To them, the Great Demon Martial Arts Exhibition is just a stage for them to achieve their goal. They've been targeting us since the beginning, so the results of the competition don't matter at all." "Then, in your opinion, those guys forfeited twice on this stage. What are they planning to do?" Elisha asked. "Could it be that they want to make a move outside the competition?" "That's very likely." Noah nodded and looked around. "In short, I feel that something is wrong. Everyone be careful. No matter what, do not act alone." "Understood." Everyone nodded in unison. Seeing Noah being surrounded by his companions and giving orders to his companions, and the companions around him carrying out Noah's orders from the bottom of their hearts, Shwenai felt a strange feeling in her heart. This feeling was completely different from when she was in Sabertooth. In that place, the relationship between the guild leader and the members was only that of a superior and subordinate, and even the relationship between the ruler and the ruled, there was not the slightest bit of affection to speak of. In that kind of guild, Shwenai could only feel the cold order and prestige. But here, Shwenai could feel waves of warmth. Because here, the guild leader's every order was for the safety of the guild members. And the guild members' obedience was also due to their trust in the guild leader. Thus, Shwenai once again realized, being able to join a guild like Fairy Tale was simply too good. Chapter 1698. The sky gradually darkened. After returning to the hotel, the group of people from Fairy Tale feasted and drank like they had done for the past 2 days. Then, those who had left halfway returned to their own residences. Before the start of the Great Demonic Combat Arts competition, the organizers had allocated the participating teams of each guild to the various inns in Coloccus. The inns allocated to the participating teams were of different sizes according to the guild. For example, Sabertooth, because they were the previous first place, the inns allocated to them were of a larger scale and could accommodate all the members of the guild. This allowed all the sorcerers of Sabertooth to stay together. Unlike Sabertooth, Fairy Tale had always been the last in the previous competitions. Therefore, the place allocated to Fairy Tale was only one of the rooms in the inn. Of course, not only did the sorcerers of Fairy Tale not stay in the same inn as the contestants, but even Team A and Team B stayed in different inns. Therefore, after the members left the banquet, they could only go their separate ways and return to their respective residences. However, under Noah's instructions, everyone was prepared to leave in groups and ensure their safety. Thus, Mira, Shwe, and Lisana left the banquet together. On the way, Lisana said apologetically to Mira and Shwe, "I'm sorry, Sister Mira, Shwe. I had to ask you to send me off." Originally, Makarov had already rented an inn for the members of Fairy Tale who did not participate in the competition to stay together. However, those fellows were either still causing trouble at the banquet or had already left. The timing of Lisana's departure was completely different. At first, Lisana had planned to wait for them to enjoy themselves before returning together. However, after knowing that Lisana was planning to leave, Mira and Shwe volunteered to send Lisana back to the inn. "Well, I didn't plan to stay for too long anyway." Mira smiled indifferently. "Besides, I'm worried about you. This is just a coincidence. Lord Noah said that the guild called Raventail will most likely attack us outside the arena." Snow added, "That's why it's safer for us to move together." "But our hotel isn't in the same direction," Lisana said helplessly. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. The banquet was held at the bar on the first floor of the hotel, where Fairy Tale Beat was assigned to. In light of this, after Mira and Snow sent Lysana back to her residence, they still had to return to their own hotel. This meant that Mira and Snow were purposely taking a detour. It was because of this that Lysana apologized. Just like what Shu and I said, it's safer to move together, Mira said gently. If something were to happen to you, not only me, but Noah would also be very worried. It would be best if we could avoid an accident with just a little trouble. Moreover, I wouldn't find it troublesome at all. Snow lowered her head and said embarrassedly, I've never tried using my own power to protect my companions. Now that I'm doing this, I'm actually a little happy. Hearing that, Mira and Lysana exchanged glances and smiled in unison. Then I'll have to trouble you, Shu and I. Lysana held Shu and I's hand. Shu and I is so powerful. She's really reliable. I feel very safe with Shu and I. Mira held Shu and I's other hand. If the three of us are together, with Raventail as our opponent, there shouldn't be a problem. Noah said that in terms of strength, even in Fairy Tale, which was famous for its strict requirements for S-rank sorcerers, Shu and I had the qualifications to become an S-rank sorcerer and was qualified to be in the top 10 of the guild. As for Mira, she was an active S-rank sorcerer and was second only to Noah, Kilda's, Lax's, and Alusha in the guild. She could be ranked in the top 5 of the guild. With Mira and Shu and I's escort, Lysana's safety would be guaranteed. After all, in Raventail, even the guild leader, Ivan, didn't have the ability to hurt Mira and Shu and I working together. Moreover, Lysana's strength wasn't weak and wasn't far from the frontline combat members of the guild. This way, with the Raventail's ability, it was not enough to hurt the three of them. Of course, the prerequisite was that the opponent only had a Raventail. With Mira and Lysana holding each of her hands, Shu and I, who was more or less in fear and trepidation, inadvertently caught a glimpse of the scene in front of her. The expression on her pretty face slightly froze, and she abruptly stopped and raised her voice. Lord Mira, Lord Lysana. Mira and Lysana were slightly startled by Shu and I's sudden stop, and immediately felt that something was wrong. They abruptly turned their heads and looked forward. In the next moment, the three girls saw it at the same time. They didn't know when, but on the huge street, there wasn't a single person. Moreover, even the surrounding street lights suddenly dimmed and lost their light. Under such circumstances, a black fog like a whirlpool kept spinning in front of them, emitting waves of evil aura. The evil aura made Mira, who had the power of the demon in her body, feel a burst of vigilance. She couldn't help but stand in front of Lysana and stare forward while speaking in a deep voice. Who? The black fog that was spinning like a whirlpool suddenly stopped. In the next moment, the black fog suddenly exploded and turned into a black wave that surged out. Mira, Lysana, and Shu and I were all shocked. They only had time to do this before the thick black fog surged in front of the three girls. At this critical moment, the only one who reacted was Mira. Danger! Mira quickly reached out and pushed Shu and I and Lysana away at the same time. The surging black fog was like a rolling wave, covering Mira and swallowing her. Shu and I and Lysana, who were pushed away by Mira, fell to the ground. Looking at Mira, who was swallowed by the black fog, they both exclaimed in shock. Sister Mira, Lord Mira. Almost at the same time, a small black shadow scurried from behind the two girls and directly rushed toward Lysana. Wong! Along with a soft trembling sound, Lysana, who was about to get up and rush into the black fog to save Mira, suddenly felt a tremor all over her body. Then, the mana in her body actually disappeared in a moment, leaving not a trace. Immediately, Lysana lost all her strength. Lysana only felt her vision suddenly spin before her body swayed, and she fell unconscious. Lord Lysana, Shu and I panicked and hurriedly hugged the fallen Lysana. Looking at the unconscious girl, she gritted her teeth and glared at the black fog in front of her. Who? Who is it? In the rolling black fog in front of her, a sinister laughter rang out. Then, The words entered Shuanai's ears. "What? Don't you recognize me?" As soon as the voice fell, a figure slowly walked out of the thick black fog and entered Shuanai's vision. The newcomer had long hair that was half black and half gray, and it was tied up and hung behind his back. It was the sinister man who had appeared in Yu Feitsue's room in the palace. The sinister man looked at Shuanai, and the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Long time no see, Shuanai." Looking at the man full of evil aura, Shuanai first stared at him. In the next second, her eyes suddenly widened as she muttered in disbelief. "You, could you be?" The sinister man revealed a sinister smile. Chapter 1699. On the other side, in the fairy tale hotel, many of his companions were still there. They continued to eat and drink as much as they could, while making a ruckus. Some of the residents living in the neighboring hotels started to complain. Noah was at the bar with Makarov, discussing with Makarov about some of today's discoveries, such as the fact that the person behind the scenes absorbing the mana of the high mages participating in the great magic wars was most likely the kingdom, as well as the abnormal behavior of Raventail, and so on. Makarov seemed to be attaching great importance to these two matters, but he didn't manage to find out anything. In front of Noah, he put on a distressed expression. Looking at the distressed Makarov, Noah could only helplessly help. After all, Makarov kept saying that he was going to retire, but when it came to matters related to the guild, he wouldn't give up without getting to the bottom of it. Noah originally intended to solve these two matters himself, but because he couldn't resist Makarov's questioning, he could only use the excuse of discussing the matter with this worrisome old president. And obviously, even Noah had just found some clues, so Makarov didn't know what to do. Thus, Makarov could only be distressed, making Noah laugh. At this time, Noah suddenly felt a familiar mana fluctuation. Feeling that familiar mana fluctuation, Noah's expression slightly froze, and he suddenly stood up. Noah's action instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. Seeing Noah suddenly stand up with an unsightly expression, Makarov immediately asked, "What's wrong?" "I felt Myra's mana." Noah directly walked out of the bar, leaving this sentence behind as he quickly walked out. "Mira is fighting now. She might have encountered an attack." While leaving the sentence, Noah also walked out of the inn. His figure directly soared into the sky, turning into a stream of light, and shot in the direction of the familiar mana fluctuation he sensed. It was only then that the group of magic shooters from Fairy Tale came to their senses. They were all shocked and rushed out of the inn in unison. They rushed in the direction that Noah was flying at as fast as they could. Whoosh! In the starry night sky, a stream of light was like a meteor streaking across the sky, shooting straight in the direction of Crocus. His dark and deep eyes were like those of an owl, flashing with a somewhat cold expression while constantly scanning the surroundings. Following the familiar mana fluctuation that he sensed, Noah quickly arrived above a dark street. Then Noah saw it. On the street below, a black swamp-like fog was violently spinning like a vortex, repeatedly releasing an evil aura. In the constantly spinning black fog, Mira, who had received Satan's soul, was agitated with surging mana. She had a slightly uncomfortable expression on her face, as if she had fallen into a swamp and was struggling with difficulty. Beside her, Lisina seemed to have fainted and was lying there. Seeing this, Noah more or less guessed the situation. There was no doubt that Mira and her party had been attacked. Moreover, the attacker's strength was very high, binding Mira and making it difficult for her to move. As for Lisana, although he didn't know what had happened to her, there wasn't any change in her aura. It seemed that she had just fainted. These speculations appeared in Noah's mind in an instant. After a moment, Noah's eyes turned sharp, and he suddenly stretched out a hand, aiming at the thick black fog below. Clang! A blue magic array spun out in front of Noah's palm, like a turret, and aimed downward, gathering mana. In the next moment, the blue magic array trembled, and the mana gathered in it turned into a beam of light that shot out toward the pitch-black fog below. Bang! The dazzling beam of mana collided with a black swamp-like fog, causing a muffled explosion. Then, as if canceling each other out, they both exploded, turning into white and black spots, dissipating into the air. It was only then that Mira seemed to have been released. Her body became light, and after staggering a few steps, she turned her head, looked in Lysana's direction, and rushed over. A dazzling light bloomed from Myra's body, allowing her to release herself from receiving Satan's soul and rush to Lysana's side. At this moment, Noah had already descended from the sky. He picked up Lysana, checked her condition, and breathed a sigh of relief. Lysana. Mira hugged her as well, looking at Noah anxiously. How's Lysana? Don't worry, she's fine. Noah grabbed Myra's hand and looked into her eyes, indicating for her to calm down. She's just fainted because she's exhausted too much mana. She'll wake up when she recovers some mana. Is that so? Mira was relieved, and she breathed a huge sigh of relief. That's great. What's going on? Noah asked Mira as he hugged Lysana. And where's Shu and I? We were ambushed. Mira bit her lip lightly. Shu and I seems to have been taken away. Noah's expression darkened. So they were ambushed? The ambusher shouldn't be Raventail, right? Noah asked calmly. At the very least, I don't think Raventail has the ability to bind you and take Shu and I away. I don't know who the ambusher is either. I was trapped by the black mist as soon as we were ambushed, and I don't know what's going on outside. I can only vaguely hear Shu and I calling out Lysana's name, and she seems to be talking to someone. Mira said unwillingly. Then, she seemed to have thought of something. She raised her eyes and looked at Noah. But the ambusher left me a message. If you want to find Shu and I, you have to go to the outskirts of Krokas alone. You can't bring anyone with you. In other words, the ambusher's target wasn't Mira, Lysana, or Shu and I, but Noah. Mira clearly understood that, and her eyes were filled with worry as she looked at Noah. However, Mira didn't say anything and remained silent. She held Noah's hand tighter and tighter. Feeling the strength of Myra's hand, Noah immediately held it back and smiled at Mira. Don't worry, even Aconaraglia can't do anything to me. How can an ambusher who only knows how to sneak around do anything to me? In a single sentence, Noah's plan was completely revealed. Mira didn't say anything and only held Noah's hand tightly, revealing her usual gentle and sweet smile. Yes, I believe you. Noah nodded and placed Lysana in Myra's arms. Then he hugged Mira as well. Grandpa and Alusha should be on their way here now. They'll be here soon, Noah instructed. Tell them not to act rashly for the time being. Leave everything here to me. If I'm not back by tomorrow, let Connor replace me with a substitute member. Shu and I didn't fight today, and the substitute member squad hasn't been confirmed yet, so there shouldn't be a problem. I know. Just leave the great demon battle exhibition to us. You've already won a lot of advantages for us. We'll definitely win, Mira said softly as she snuggled in Noah's arms. Remember to bring Shu and I back. Noah kissed Myra's forehead, and then Lysana's forehead before getting up. Under Myra's gaze, he turned into a streak of light and shot into the sky, flying out of the city. Looking at Noah's gradually disappearing figure, Mira hugged Lysana tightly and murmured softly, "Come back soon." Chapter 1700. The night gradually deepened. Some cold wind slowly blew across the land, causing the flowers and trees on the outskirts of Karlakas to sway, giving off a very tranquil feeling. In the sky, dark clouds began to appear, covering the moonlight. For a moment, darkness swallowed the entire land, causing the light to become extremely dim. At a certain moment, in Karlakas, where there was still sufficient light, a stream of light flew out, streaking across the night sky at an extremely fast speed and landed on the outskirts. Noah slowly stepped forward and looked around. Whoosh! The cold wind seemed to have not noticed that the atmosphere had begun to become tense and continued to blow across the land in the outskirts, causing Noah's robe to flutter. Noah slightly closed his eyes against the cold wind, then suddenly opened them, looked in one direction, and said straightforwardly stop fooling around. Enough with your mystifying tricks. It's time to come out, right? The whole place was silent. The silence seemed to be mocking Noah's words, silently telling him that there was no one here. It continued to spread in the air. Noah just quietly looked in that direction, without saying anything, and without doing anything, as if he was not anxious at all, maintaining his silence. Maintaining this strange state, it was not until 5 minutes later that a clear sound of speechlessness was heard. Immediately, in the direction Noah was looking, several figures began to slowly appear and walk towards him. Looking at the group of people slowly approaching, Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. There were a total of 5 people. The leader of the group was a man clad in resplendent golden armor. Surprisingly, it was the Raven-tail, Alexei. Behind Alexei, 4 people stood in a row, as if Alexei was their leader. They followed Alexei and walked over. The 4 people's appearances were very distinct. One of them was a short, fat man who looked very annoying. One of them was a young girl with eye-catching long red hair that was tied into 2 braids. She was dressed in a red dress. The other was a clown dressed like a magician, but on his back stood a dark brown little person. The last one was a man with black eyeshadow and black lipstick, with a face like a snake, giving off a gloomy feeling. The 4 people were all members of the Raven-tail. Including Alexei, the 5 people were the Raven-tail participants in the Great Demon Combat Arts competition. Noah more or less remembered the information about these people. The short fatty was called Narabutinku, and the magic he used was called Needle Explosion, which was a kind of magic that could make the arm full of needles and strengthen it, and its destructive power was comparable to that of an explosion. On the first day of the Great Demon Combat Art competition, he was the one who appeared with Gray and Julian. The girl with crimson hair was called Freya, and the spell she used was called Crimson Hair. It was a spell that allowed her to freely manipulate her hair, making it longer or shorter at will. She could even make her hair as hot as fire to attack. She was Lucy's opponent on the first day of the Great Demonic Combat Tournament. The clown dressed like a magician was called Obra, and the magic he used was ominous, which had not been shown so far. He appeared in today's competition, but after Noah finished challenging the demon's subduing hall, he directly forfeited, which was very mysterious. The man who looked as gloomy as a snake was called Black Snake, and the magic he used was called Mimicry, which was a kind of magic that could change himself into other forms and manipulate them. Black Snake's mimicry target was sand, so he could freely turn into sand and manipulate the sand he transformed into. As for Alexei, his specific strength was unknown, his specific magic was unknown, and even his specific appearance and specific background were unknown. Today, he was chosen to duel with Laxes, but just like Obra, he directly forfeited. To others, Alexei was very mysterious, even more mysterious than Obra. However, to Noah, Alexei's so-called mystery was just a joke. At this point, are you still going to hide? Noah glanced at Alexei and said with a smile, Ivan Doria. Alexei's footsteps suddenly froze, and he stopped. However, Noah could imagine. Alexei's face under the mask, at this time, was very ugly. Under such circumstances, Noah said as if he was talking to himself, if you want to hide, then at least use some decent means, such as directly using transformation magic to change into other people's appearance, and then use a magic tool to hide your own aura, to eliminate your own aura, that is called perfect. Wearing a set of broken armor and a broken mask, you can also hide your identity and participate in the Great Demonic Arts competition. Does the kingdom really intend to not let people violate the rules? The Great Demonic Arts competition that determined the guild ranking every year. It was a ceremony that every guild in the Fiori kingdom could participate in. However, if you want to participate in this ceremony, you have to at least abide by 2 basic rules. 1, you must have the guild's coat of arms, and can only appear as a sorcerer of the guild. 2, the participant can't be the guild leader. Not abiding by the above 2 points is a violation of the rules. Alexei had blatantly violated the second rule. As early as during the preliminaries, Noah had already discovered this guy's true identity and underhanded means. Ivan had already attacked Noah and exposed his aura under Noah's sensing ability. When he appeared again, even if he covered his face and did not hide his aura, how could he hide from Noah? Therefore, Noah thought that the so-called Raventail was just a group of clowns. Seeing that his true identity was exposed as soon as he appeared, Alexei. No, it should be Ivan. After a moment of silence, he reached out his hand and took off the mask on his face. He stared at Noah with a gloomy expression and smiled coldly. No wonder you dare to say that humans can't be compared to you. You are indeed difficult to deal with. Whether I am difficult to deal with or not, until now you only know. Noah curled his lips. If that's the case, then I have really overestimated you. After that, Noah did not give Ivan any chance to reply and went straight to the point. You took the initiative to give up on the great magic battles today for this, right? Let the guy who instigated you come out. Ivan's expression stiffened when he heard this, but he still put on an act and said, What instigated me? I don't understand what you're talking about. As soon as Ivan finished his sentence, he immediately noticed that Noah was looking at him with a disdainful gaze. Are you trying to say that you were able to successfully attack Mira, Snow, and Lysana all because of the strength of your Raventail ? Noah said sarcastically. If that's the case, then I will honestly admit that I have underestimated your strength. The group of Raventail's magic shooters immediately showed anger on their faces. Noah's words were obviously looking down on them. Don't be too proud, little brat. Little brat. Ivan couldn't help but get angry and roared at Noah. Don't forget, we are in charge now. The person you want is in my hands. Then tell me where Snow is. Noah looked coldly at Ivan. I don't have much time to play games with you. Play games? Ivan's eyes widened slightly as he flew into a rage. You actually said that the plan that I've been plotting for so long is a game. Plotting? Noah looked away and said in a tone that made Ivan extremely angry. Forget it. I can't be bothered to waste time on you. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah suddenly shot out without any warning and appeared in front of Ivan at an astonishing speed. Wah! Ivan's expression changed drastically. However, before Ivan could react, Noah suddenly reached out and grabbed him by the neck, lifting him up and hanging him in the air. The group of Raventail's magic shooters were all shocked. In the next moment, a terrifying burst of mana rose from Noah's body. Chapter 17:01. Boom! The terrifying mana that surged from Noah's body directly turned into a substantial shockwave that violently vibrated and sent the Raventail magic shooters that surrounded Ivan flying. The Raventail magic shooters that were sent flying did not even have time to scream before they crashed heavily onto the ground. The screams that reached their mouths turned into muffled groans as they fell to the ground and wailed incessantly. Purely by releasing his mana, Noah did not make a move at all, and the Raventail magic shooters had all fallen around him. Ivan, whose neck was being choked by Noah, had a change of expression on his face. But soon after, he was attacked by a sense of suffocation and let out an inaudible wail. Noah stared coldly at Ivan, who was struggling with all his might as his face gradually turned purple. He tightened his grip on Ivan's neck bit by bit, causing Ivan's feet that were lifted off the ground to thrash about wildly. However, Noah still tightened his grip on Ivan's neck bit by bit, causing Ivan's struggle to become weaker and weaker. Finally, his hands drooped down and his eyes began to roll back. He looked like he was about to breathe in and out. It was only then that Noah released his grip on Ivan's neck and let Ivan fall to the ground with gravity. Cough, cough, cough. Ivan immediately covered his neck and coughed uncontrollably, as though he had just drowned and was gasping for air. You. Ivan looked up, panting wretchedly as he stared at Noah in disbelief and opened his mouth in disbelief. How dare you do this to me? No matter what, Ivan had a hostage in his hands. It was because of this hostage that Ivan dared to bring his men and appear in front of Noah in an upright manner. Of course, it was not right to say that he was upright. In the beginning, Ivan was still hiding in the dark and looking for an opportunity to sneak an attack on Noah. He planned to take down Noah first to increase his chances of success. However, because he was discovered by Noah, Ivan's plan could only be declared a failure. However, Ivan was not afraid because he had a hostage in his hands. After he was discovered, he came out directly. Originally, in Ivan's imagination, Noah should now be humble and even kneel down to beg for mercy. Then, he would raise the condition for Noah to exchange lumen starlight for Shunai. Ivan never thought that this script would go wrong from the beginning. Noah actually attacked Raventail without any scruples when Ivan had a hostage in his hands. Was he not afraid that something would happen to the hostage? Looking at the look of disbelief on Ivan's face, Noah seemed to have seen through his puzzlement and sneered. "That's right, I do want to find Shunai, but not to the extent of being threatened by you. Anyway, I've already confirmed that there is at least one mastermind behind you. Moreover, you don't seem to be in cahoots, but are just using each other. In that case, I'll just talk to that guy directly. I don't need to get any clues from you. Do you understand what I mean?" Noah bent down and looked at Ivan condescendingly as he said sarcastically, "In other words, you're completely useless. You're just being used as a pawn to die, idiot." After saying that, Noah raised a hand directly at Ivan. A magical circle suddenly spun out from Noah's palm and aimed at Ivan, who was paralyzed on the ground, gathering mana within. "Wait, wait," Ivan screamed in horror. "You can't kill me. You can't kill me." Ignoring Ivan's screams, Noah's eyes didn't carry any emotions at all. The magical circle aimed at Ivan continued to gather mana, causing the magical circle to gradually emit a bright light. At this moment, an unprecedented shadow of death began to spread in Ivan's heart. Thus, Ivan understood. Noah really intended to kill him. "I've told you before, haven't I?" Noah looked straight at Ivan, his eyes revealing a cold emotion. "If I have the chance, I'll definitely kill you." The magical circle aimed at Ivan became brighter and brighter. Sensing the impending death, Ivan roared with his eyes bulging out of their sockets. "Abra, quick, eliminate his mana." Suddenly, the dark brown figure on the body of Abra, who had fallen to the ground, violently shot out like a bullet towards Noah's direction. At the same time, the clown who was dressed like a magician collapsed and turned into a pile of clothes. That Abra was actually just a dummy. Squeak, squeak. The dark brown figure let out an animal-like cry with a treacherous smile on his face. He suddenly pounced on Noah and grabbed his shoulder tightly. Clang! In the next second, a magical circle lit up on the body of the dark brown figure. No one knew that Abra had the ability to eliminate the mana of any individual or even any target. If the target of this elimination magic was an individual, then all the mana in their body would be wiped clean in an instant. Therefore, Abra's magic had always been Ivan's trump card. Unfortunately, Ivan chose the wrong target to use it on. Wong, accompanied by a trembling sound, a terrifying amount of mana was constantly released from Noah's body. Under the effect of Abra's elimination magic, it was being consumed at a terrifying speed. However, Noah did not resist at all under such a terrifying consumption. He glanced at the little dark brown figure on his shoulder, and his eyes were full of mockery. It was as if he did not care about the terrifying consumption of mana at all, and his expression remained calm from the beginning to the end. The treacherous smile on the figure's face froze. Ivan's expression became interesting all of a sudden. In the next instant, a hand suddenly reached out and grabbed the small dark brown figure, squeezing it tightly in the palm of his hand. "I see. You're the real Abra." "That clown is just an illusion." Noah stared at the shocked figure in his hand with a cold glint in his eyes. "The magic that can eliminate mana. You're the one who did it to her, aren't you?" There was finally a hint of anger in Noah's tone, and a surge of magic power surged in his hand that was holding the little dark brown figure. Bam! With a muffled sound, Noah fiercely clenched his fist, and the palm that was filled with surging magic power immediately crushed the dark brown dwarf. Blood splashed out and sprinkled on Ivan's face. "Ah!" Ivan let out a heart-wrenching scream. He wasn't grieving because of Abra's death. Instead, It was because Aubra's death caused a shadow of death in his heart to explode. Then, the mana that gathered in the magic array in front of Noah's hand suddenly turned into a flash of light that instantly covered Ivan's entire body, causing him to be gradually annihilated in the beam of mana amidst his heart-wrenching screams. His body was smashed into pieces, leaving no trace behind. After the beam of mana that shot out from the magic array destroyed Ivan, it still streaked across the space without slowing down and landed on the terrified Nerapudinku and the Black Serpent, annihilating the two rather outstanding magic shooters into nothingness. In the end, the beam of mana that shot out rubbed against the air and shot into the distance, disappearing at the other end of the horizon. Ivan, Nerapudinku, the Black Serpent, and Aubra were all dead. Only Freya was left. She sat there with a dull expression, as if she had lost her mind. She didn't react for a long time. Ignoring Freya's reaction, Noah retracted all the magic in his body, turned around, and looked in another direction. "All right, you've seen enough of the show. It's time to come out, right?" As soon as he said this, a round of applause rang out. To be able to kill the person holding the hostage without batting an eyelid. Should I say, as expected of an existence that dares to claim that humans can't be compared to? A thick black fog suddenly rose and turned into a devilish man that appeared in front of Noah. Chapter 17:02. Whoosh! No one knew when it started, but the cold wind started to blow again, blowing across the land and the suburbs. Noah and the evil man looked at each other. One's eyes were full of judgment, the other's eyes were full of evil. Both of them were silent, and no one spoke at the first moment. Not long after, Noah spoke indifferently. "Who are you?" "Me?" The evil man shrugged and said so. "You can call me Luo." "Luo." Noah frowned. For some reason, Noah felt that this guy who called himself Luo seemed to be strange. No, not strange, but his existence itself seemed to have some kind of inconsistency, as if there was a feeling of gears that couldn't be bitten, which made people feel very uncomfortable. Under such circumstances, Noah even had an illusion. He seemed to know the other party, but also seemed to not know the other party. It was an indescribable illusion. Feeling that clear illusion, Noah's frown deepened. Noah, who couldn't get rid of this illusion, simply asked directly, "Where is Xuanai?" Hearing this, the evil man who called himself Luo suddenly smiled. "Don't worry, Xuanai is very safe now. I've arranged for her to be in a place where no one can touch her. As long as you agree to my request, I'll immediately tell you her whereabouts." "Request?" Noah narrowed his eyes and curled his lips. "Fine. Let me hear what you're planning to ask for by attacking my companions." Hearing Noah's sarcastic words, Luo smiled helplessly. "You don't need to be angry, and you don't need to be hostile to me. My request is actually very simple for you. I just feel that if I don't have any bargaining chips, you wouldn't agree, so I'll let Xuanai come with me." "I'm very sincere," Luo said as if he was implying something. "Look, I only took Xuanai away and didn't do anything to your two fiancés, right? Let me make it clear, the one who attacked the girl named Lisana was not me, but the guy from Raventail." Law glanced at Freya, an evil and vicious smile appearing on his face. "If you're not comfortable with this, I can help you get rid of the rest of the trash." Freya's face was instantly filled with fear. She maintained her paralyzed posture on the ground as she shuffled her body backward, shaking her head continuously. Don't kill me, don't kill me." Obviously, the girl named Freya was scared out of her wits. "Okay, just tell us what you're here for." Noah stared at Law. "What is your purpose?" "My purpose is actually very simple." Law met Noah's gaze, and although the evil smile on his face did not change, the look in his eyes changed. "Noah Dole, you can no longer participate in the next Great Demonic Combat Arts competition. As long as you agree to my condition, I will take you to see Xuanai immediately. Don't participate in the Great Demonic Combat Arts competition." Noah was stunned. "Yes, don't participate in the Great Demonic Combat Arts competition." Law stared at Noah tightly and said this half-jokingly. "Didn't you claim to be an existence that humans cannot be compared to?" then what is the point of competing with a group of weak humans? Can't you just leave the rest of your companions in the guild to do the rest of the things? Or do you have no confidence in your companions? Before, although Law's voice was full of evil charm, Noah did not feel much emotion from it. However, at this moment, Law's words carried some emotion, which surprised Noah a little. At this moment, Noah rolled his eyes and asked, "Why do you go through so much trouble to get me to withdraw from the great demonic combat arts competition? Could it be that you think I'm a threat to the victory of any team?" Law snorted. "The outcome of the great demonic combat arts competition has been decided at the beginning, as long as you don't participate." Law's firm tone made Noah puzzled. The outcome of the great demonic combat arts competition has been decided at the beginning? What does this mean? Also, as long as Noah doesn't participate, the result will not change? Why is Law so sure? For a moment, thousands of thoughts flashed through Noah's mind. However, even though there were many doubts, there was one thing that could be confirmed. That is, if Noah continues to participate in the great demonic combat art competition, it will definitely cause some kind of obstacle to the guy in front of him who calls himself Law. Because of this, Law did not hesitate to kidnap Xuan and use this to make Noah compromise. However, it can be seen that Law is very afraid of Noah. Whether it was the power or the existence itself, Noah made Law feel a very strong fear and even vigilance. Therefore, Law also did not dare to completely provoke Noah. He just took Xuan away and did not do anything to Mira and Lisana. If Law had done something to Mira and Lisana, at this time, Noah may have already gone berserk and blasted him to pieces, right? It is because of this that Law did not completely offend Noah. As for the Raven Tail, it is purely a prop used by Law to test Noah's reaction. Law wants to see how Noah will treat the Raven Tail when Obra of the Raven Tail eliminates all of Lisana's magic and causes her to faint. If Noah chooses to compromise with the Raven Tail, then Law will not talk to Noah so nicely as he is now, and he will definitely use Xuan to threaten Noah. Unfortunately, Noah had annihilated all the members of Raven Tail except for Freya, especially Obra, who had eliminated Lisana's magic power. He had crushed her to death without leaving any room for negotiation. In this way, Law does not dare to easily anger Noah, because that is not good for Noah and Law. Thinking of this, Noah asked abruptly, "What's in it for you if I don't participate in the great demonic combat arts competition?" Law was silent for a moment. Noah was not in a hurry. He just looked straight at Law, quietly waiting for his reaction. After a while, Law grinned and looked up at Noah. "Well, if you really want to know everything, I can tell you everything, including the purpose of the existence of the great demonic combat arts competition." Hearing this sentence, Noah's eyes suddenly flashed. "So that's how it is," Noah said very calmly. "It seems that you know what is going on with the phenomenon of magic being absorbed from the sorcerers one by one during the great demonic combat arts competition. Have you noticed?" Law said indifferently. "It's just that it doesn't matter now. By this year's great demonic combat arts competition, the magic needed for the Eclipse plan has been gathered." "Eclipse plan?" Noah asked. "What's that? Do you want to know?" Law raised his eyebrows, and after a while, said to Noah, "If you want to know, then agree to my request. In that case, after the great demonic combat art competition is over, I will tell you everything." Hearing this, Noah understood. Luo would not reveal anything else. "Let me remind you first, don't use the Raventail method on me," Law said as if he was on guard against something. "If you intend to take me directly and ask me about the whereabouts of Shu and all the information about the Eclipse plan, then I won't tell you even if I kill myself." Law's expression became extremely cold. It was not coldness toward Noah, nor was it coldness toward anyone else. It was coldness toward oneself. Then Law said this sentence, "Don't think I can't do it. The Eclipse plan is everything for me now. If it fails, then I might as well die. So, believe me, I can definitely do it." This time, it was Noah's turn to be silent. After a long time, Noah lifted his feet and walked in the direction of Law. Law's whole body tensed up. However, Noah did not do anything to Law, but directly past him back to back with Law, and spoke lightly. Well, let me see what you're going to do. Law's eyes lit up, and the evil smile returned to his face. Chapter 17:03. After that, Law immediately took Noah and went to the location of Shu and I. Under the leadership of Law, Noah came to the venue of the great demonic war, Dome Flatten. With Noah, Law walked into the venue and found a secret path. After a while, they came to a huge cave. Noah, who came to the cave with Law, immediately saw it. In this cave, there are countless huge corpses lying. Noah looked around with surprise and astonishment in his eyes. Dragon's corpse? Yes. Law nodded. The corpses here are all the corpses of dragons, the corpses of dragons that have been around for hundreds of years. Hearing this, Noah turned his eyes directly to Law. Law naturally understood what Noah meant. Noah was asking Law to explain why there were so many dragon corpses here. 400 years ago, the world was still dominated by dragons. Human beings were very weak compared to the powerful dragons. Law began to explain as he walked forward. However, not all dragons and the dragons who dominate the world regard human beings as insignificant ants. Some dragons are attracted by the rich feelings of human beings and hope to live with them. So, the dragons have been divided into two factions. One faction wants to coexist with human beings, and the other faction advocates keeping human beings as livestock or food. They quarreled with each other and eventually launched a war between dragons. Law's voice became a little empty. The war between the dragons is extremely terrifying. Just one of them has the power to easily destroy a city. When all of them gather together to fight, the damage caused is simply unimaginable. The war between the two factions has been in a stalemate for a long time, and there's been no clear winner, so the war has been going on for a long time. Under such circumstances, sooner or later, the world will be destroyed in the hands of the dragons. In order to end the war and defeat the opposition, the dragons of the coexistence faction made a decision. Law glanced at Noah. That is, to teach the magic that can destroy dragons to human beings and let human beings participate in the war. Noah suddenly turned his gaze and looked at Law with a surprised look in his dark and deep eyes. It seems that you have guessed what magic it is. Law grinned. The magic that can destroy dragons. Yes, that's the magic of the Dragon Slayer. That's how the Dragon Slayer magic appeared. The power of the Dragon Slayer magic, presumably as a person in the same guild as the 4 Dragon Slayer magic, you should be very clear about it. Law's eyes twinkled slightly. Not to mention Windy Mabel of the Sky Dragon, Naz of the Fire Dragon, and Gadulalet Fox of the Iron Dragon have begun to gradually show their power. In this year's Great Magic Battle Arts competition, the so-called elites of the Magic Guide Guild, who can match those 2 people, can be counted on one hand. Not to mention Lax's Dole of the Thunder Dragon, your brother. I'm afraid his strength is close to that of Jula of the Rock Iron, right? Noah nodded non-committally, but in his heart, he agreed with Law's words. The Dragon Slayer magic is indeed quite powerful. At least, from the perspective of the field of magic, there are very few magic that can be compared to it, except for super magic. After learning this kind of magic, not to mention Naz, Gadula, and Lax's, even Windy, who is only 14 years old, already has a certain degree of power, much stronger than the average mage. It is conceivable that the power of the Dragon Slayer magic is indeed much stronger than ordinary magic. If you think about it carefully, you can actually understand. There are so many guilds in the Fiori Kingdom, and Fairy Tail and Saber-Tooth were both known as the strongest guilds in the Fiori Kingdom for a period of time, above the rest of the guilds in the kingdom. Such 2 guilds must have gathered a lot of elites, and there must be a lot of excellent mages. However, even so, in the 2 guilds, the position of the Dragon Slayer Archmage had always been high. He either occupied the position of a frontline combat member or was simply the strongest Archmage in the guild. This was enough to explain everything. However, human beings are very greedy creatures. Although the dragons of the coexistence faction found that human beings have rich emotions and were attracted by this, They did not find that it is precisely because of the existence of rich emotions that there is darkness in the hearts of human beings that the dragons cannot match. Law seemed to be ridiculing the stupidity of the dragons of the coexistence faction, and as if he was showing contempt for human beings, he spoke sarcastically. So, the desire of human beings who got power from the dragons also began to expand. When the victory of the coexistence faction was in sight, even those dragons who wanted to coexist with human beings were killed. At this point, Law's tone became dignified, and among that group, a man used the Dragon Slayer magic to eliminate a large number of dragons, and finally he grew scales and fangs, and gradually became a dragon. A human turned into a dragon. Noah stood up in surprise. In this regard, Law gave a positive answer. That's right. That person turned into a dragon. You can treat it as a side effect of the Dragon Slayer magic, or as a mutation caused by slaughtering a large number of dragons. No one knows what the real situation is. I only know that the sleeping dragons here all died at the hands of that man. Noah's brows wrinkled tightly. Staring straight at Law's back, Noah was silent for a while, and then asked word by word. That man, who is he? Law stopped in his tracks. In the next second, Law slowly turned around and looked at Noah, his evil eyes filled with an indescribable light. That man, because he slaughtered all the dragons, in the end, even he himself became a dragon with dark wings. Undoubtedly, he was a human, but he became the Dragon King. The war that gave birth to the Dragon King was called the Dragon King Ceremony. Law's voice sounded very clear, and the name of the Dragon King is Aeconarolia. When a familiar name came into Noah's ears, although Noah had some guesses in his heart, he still couldn't help but be speechless. However, if you think about it, it seems so natural. If it wasn't for the ability to slaughter all the dragons in the entire dragon clan, how could Aeconarolia have a 4-digit level of power? If it wasn't to this extent with Noah's strength, how could he not even be able to take down a dragon? Aeconarolia, the black dragon who destroyed a huge country in Revelation. His real body is not only the Dragon King who obliterated the dragon clan that dominated the world, but also a human who became a dragon. I heard that 7 years ago, Aeconarolia descended on your guild's holy land, Celestial Wolf Island, and almost annihilated all of you. You survived because of the protection of magic that can even freeze time. Law suddenly smiled. In that case, you should know the power of the Dragon King named Aeconarolia. With that said, Law turned around and continued to lead the way for Noah. Although Law didn't say it directly, Noah still heard a meaning from his words. Didn't you claim to be an existence that humans can't compare to? But if the opponent is Aeconarolia, there's nothing you can do, right? That was what Law wanted to say. Of course, Law didn't know. In the battle on Celestial Wolf Island 7 years ago, although Noah was protected and frozen by Mavis super magic, Aeconarolia also suffered a heavy blow. If Law knew about this, he wouldn't be so calm now, right? However, it is undeniable that Law did bring very important information to Noah. If he didn't know this information, in the future, if he faced Aeconarolia, Noah would definitely suffer a big loss. Just when Noah was so glad, Law suddenly spoke. Well, we're here. Noah raised his head almost subconsciously and looked forward. Chapter 1704. In the depths of the cave, full of dragon corpses, in a dark corner, Xuanai was leaning against the rock wall with her head down and her eyes closed. She seemed to have lost consciousness. Looking at Xuanai like that, Noah's heart tightened slightly. He quickened his pace, past Law, and came to Xuanai. He squatted down and checked Xuanai's breath. Don't worry, Xuanai just fainted. I didn't use any violent means on her. Law spread out his hands. Can you rest assured now? It seems that Law was very afraid of Noah, so he avoided angering Noah in all aspects, lest Noah get angry and really destroy him regardless of anything. From this point, it can also be seen that Law admitted that he was not Noah's opponent. However, that's not surprising. Not to mention Luo, I believe that no matter who it is, As long as they saw the amazing scene of Noah using the power of the heavenly sword of salvation in the great demon battle arts arena that day, they would not think that they could be a match for Noah. A divine sword that can even cut a star. In the face of this legendary level power, it's estimated that only a stupid guy like Jermaine can speak arrogantly. Noah could naturally see Law's fear of him, but he didn't completely believe the words of this evil guy. After checking Xuan Nai's physical condition and finding nothing unusual, he raised his head and looked at Law. Under Noah's gaze, Law also felt a little difficult to breathe. After all, now, Noah has found Xuan Nai, and it's hard to guarantee that he won't do something to him. You don't want to break the promise you made, do you? Law's smile became a little forced. That's not what a strong person would do. Done by Powerhouse? Noah curled his lips. I don't think I have that kind of cultivation, but you should be glad that you really didn't do anything to the people around me. After that, Noah stopped looking at Law and took out the gift card. Clank! The dark gold gift card flashed, and a bottle of water appeared in Noah's hand. Opening the bottle cap, Noah fed the water into Snow's mouth bit by bit. Seeing this, Luo Kai confirmed that Noah really didn't intend to do anything to him. He unconsciously breathed a sigh of relief and said to Noah, "From the looks of it, you seem to have brought enough food and water, so I don't have to specially prepare them." Prepare food and water? Noah's hand movement paused, and his eyes turned back to Law. In other words, you plan to let me and Xuan Nai continue to stay here? Hearing this, Law did not answer directly, but said this in a roundabout way. Although I don't think you'll go back on your word. In order to avoid any accidents, there's nothing wrong with you and Xuan Nai staying here before the Great Demon Combat Arts Exhibition competition ends, right? This sentence Law obviously said very insincerely. If he really believed that Noah would not break his promise, then Law would not let Noah stay in such a place. Don't you want to know the content of the solar eclipse plan? Law said as if he wanted to make the last insurance. As long as you stay here until the end of the Great Demon Combat Arts Exhibition competition, then, when the Great Demon Combat Arts Exhibition competition is over, I will tell you everything. After that, Law's body was covered by a black shadow, turned into a black mist, and disappeared in place. Watching Law disappear in front of his eyes, Noah's eyes showed some thoughtfulness, and after a long time, he curled his lips. Let's see what tricks you're going to play. In this way, the sky gradually brightened up. In the fairy tale hotel, everyone gathered here, not as loud as before, but whispered in disgust, and the atmosphere was very dignified. After a while, Elisha glanced out of the window, looked at the sky getting brighter and brighter, and sighed. It seems that Noah and Xuan and I won't be able to come back in time. Elisha's words made the fairy tale group more or less silent. Makarov, sitting at the bar, crossed his arms, closed his eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, Makarov opened his eyes and said, "Don't worry. Kana, in today's game, you will replace Noah and play with Team B." Everyone's eyes converged on Makarov's body. "I have no problem." Kana rarely did not hold the bottle and frowned slightly. "But, Noah, don't you need to take care of him?" "Yes." Nazi stepped forward, clenched his fist, and shouted at Makarov. "At least let me help Noah. You'll just be a burden if you go." Gray said this indifferently. "If there's something that even Noah can't solve, even if we go, it'll probably be useless, right?" Hearing this, everyone looked a little helpless. It had to be said that Gray's words were very correct. If there's something that even Noah can't solve, even if the entire fairy tale group went with him, they still wouldn't be able to solve it, right? Only Elisha clearly saw that although Gray said this, his hands were clenched into fists. Obviously, although he said this, if it was really necessary, Gray would definitely be like Nazi and go to Noah's side without hesitation. "How is Brother Noah now?" When he hugged Xia Lulu worriedly. "I'm so worried." "Don't worry." Mi stretched out her hand and pressed on Wendy's shoulder, the smile on her face still unchanged. "If it's Noah, he'll be fine." "That's right." Lucy also comforted her. "Noah is so strong. Not to mention humans, even dragons are different. If they can beat him, they'll be fine." Although this statement is very unpleasant, I also agree. Gadjaloo said intentionally or unintentionally. Undoubtedly, that guy is a human, but he's as strong as a monster. Even Aconarolia can't do anything to him. What else do we have to worry about? Ditto. Laxus closed his eyes and spoke in a seemingly leisurely manner. Instead of worrying about Noah, it's better to worry about our game today. Didn't Lord Noah entrust the game to us before he left? Julian whispered. Julian thinks that Lord Noah is telling us that even without him, we will never lose. Everyone looked at each other and laughed in unison. Julian is right, Makarov said. Noah entrusted the game to us. Since that's the case, we can't lose. Otherwise, we'll be betraying Noah's trust. Also, although we won't lose without Noah, we can't do without Noah, Makarov said. So, those who need to participate in the game, focus on the game. As for the rest, some of you stay to take care of Lysana, and some of you go out to see if there are any clues to Noah and Shu and I's whereabouts. Remember, work as a team. No one can be left alone. Makarov's gaze swept across everyone present. That guy, Ivan, may still be watching us in secret, you know? Everyone nodded their heads and agreed. If that's the case, Naz raised his fist and his whole body burned with flames. I won't lose today's game. Not only today, we must obtain victory in the Great Devil Battle exhibition. Gray's mouth split into a grin. No matter who it is, bring it on. All of a sudden, everyone's fighting spirit was ignited. All right, Makarov jumped down from the bar and declared loudly, let's get moving. Yes. Everyone's voices rang out in unison. Everyone followed Makarov's instructions. Some stayed to take care of the unconscious Lysana, while others went out to look for Noah. The contestants, on the other hand, headed towards the arena. Nobody noticed that a young, fairy-like girl was floating on the ceiling of the inn. She looked at the group of people in the guild and smiled. Then, she turned into a phantom and disappeared. Chapter 1705. Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally the 4th day of our Great Demon Combat Arts competition. At this time, the Great Demon Combat Arts competition has entered the countdown. After all, the competition only lasts for 5 days, but I believe that the contestants will continue to give us exciting performances. On the rostrum of the Great Demon Combat Arts competition, Chapati was still reporting enthusiastically as usual, trying his best to stir up the atmosphere of the audience. However, although the audience's enthusiasm did not diminish, the contestants from the various large guilds were all looking in the direction of Fairy Tale B's contestant area, whispering to each other with puzzled expressions on their faces. In particular, in the contestant area of Sabretooth, Sting, Rog, Lucifer, Olga, and Maniba were all looking in the direction of Fairy Tale B's contestant area and looking at each other. Then, Lucifer spoke. There's no doubt that Noah Doria is not here. He probably won't be appearing today. The reason why the magic shooters of the major guilds had been paying attention to the situation of Fairy Tale B's contestant area was because they realized that Noah was not there. It was probably the first time that such a commotion was caused because of a contestant's absence, right? However, it was understandable that it would turn out this way. Who asked Noah's performance to be so amazing in the past 3 days? Of course, Noah's movements had long become the focus of attention of the major guilds and even the great magic shooters. Now that they realized that Noah was not there, these people were naturally very puzzled and even started to discuss it. Why isn't he appearing? Rog, who is usually silent, could not help but speak. Could it be that something happened? Rog, your question is a little stupid, Sting said a little disinterestedly. With that guy's strength, how could something happen to him? Unlike before, now, Sting and the others had truly experienced Noah's strength. Moreover, it was an unfathomable strength. So, to be honest, Sting did not think that anything had happened to Noah. Obviously, the others were thinking the same thing. In other words, the reason why that guy didn't appear was either because he was held back by something, or because he felt that there was no need to continue. Olga smacked his lips. I hope he's held back by something. Otherwise, it would be too unpleasant. Maniba didn't say anything as she listened to the conversation between Sting and the others. She only looked in the direction of Fairy Tale B, and an unfriendly smile gradually surfaced on her heavily made-up face. Forget it. No matter what the reason is, it's good that he didn't appear. Since that man took the initiative to give up the competition, then in this year's Great Demon Combat Arts Exhibition, our saber-tooth position will not be shaken. Hearing this, other than the cold Rog, Sting, Lucius, and Olga also laughed. For Saber-Tooth, this year's Great Devil Combat Exhibition was undoubtedly full of misfortunes. And these disasters were all because of one person, Noah Dole. Now that Noah was no longer here, then in this year's Great Demon Combat Arts Exhibition competition, there was no one who could stop Saber-Tooth from reaching the top. At least, this was what the 5 people belonging to Saber-Tooth thought. Unfortunately, after today, these people who thought highly of themselves would realize a cruel fact. That was, even without Noah, the existence called Fairy Tale was not something that anyone could mess with. When the Great Demon Combat Arts Exhibition competition was in full swing, no one knew. Below the venue, in a cave full of dragon skeletons, 2 breaths rose and fell, leaving a faint trace of life in this silent space. Ugh! Accompanied by a soft moan, Xuanai slowly woke up from her sleep and opened her eyes. As soon as she opened her eyes, Xuanai saw an extremely ferocious dragon skeleton. At that moment, Xuanai's heart skipped a beat. She abruptly straightened her body and put one hand on her waist as if it was a conditioned reflex. Originally, all of Xuanai's star keys were there. However, when Xuanai stretched out her hand, she touched nothing. Immediately, Xuanai opened her eyes wide and felt around in a panic. Key. Where's my key? As a star spirit archmage, without her key, Xuanai was no different from an ordinary girl. Of course, the reason why Xuanai was so flustered was not because she did not feel safe without her key. This seemingly strong, but actually very weak girl cherished her star spirit keys very much. As for why, there were 2 reasons. 1. Among those star spirit keys, there were Pisces, Libra, and Ophiuchus constellations that had accompanied Xuanai all these years. To Xuanai, they were her only companions before joining Fairy Tale. 2. Among those star spirit keys, there were Aries, Gemini, and Scorpio constellations that Noah gave to Xuanai. Xuanai would never forgive herself for losing the key given by the person she yearned for. Therefore, Xuanai looked for her star spirit keys in a panic and looked around. Until then, Xuanai realized that there were huge dragon skeletons all around her. And in front of Xuanai, there was a piece of clothing. A piece of clothing that had just covered Xuanai's body fell to the ground as Xuanai straightened up. Looking at that piece of clothing, Xuanai was stunned. She picked it up and muttered with uncertainty. This seems to be Sir Noah's clothing. This question was answered in the next second. In the dark and deathly silent cave, a series of footsteps slowly sounded and attracted Xuanai's attention. Then Xuanai saw it. In front, Noah was looking around and stroking the dragon skeletons as he walked over and noticed that Xuanai had woken up. Xuanai. Noah was stunned and walked toward Xuanai. Are you awake? Sir Noah. Xuanai's heart calmed down a little, but she still anxiously spoke. Sir Noah, did you see my star spirit key? Your star spirit key is with me. Noah took out a bunch of keys from his pocket and handed it to Xuanai. Because it fell on the ground, I temporarily put away. Xuanai quietly let out a sigh of relief. She took the key and pressed it in front of her, looking at ease. It wasn't until this moment that Winnow recalled the current situation and looked at Noah hesitantly. Sir Noah, why are we here? What? Noah squatted down and looked at Xuanai. Did you forget what happened before you lost consciousness? Xuanai began to recall. Not long after, Xuanai's hand that was holding the star spirit key tightened as he spoke with some uncertainty. I was attacked. Yes. Noah nodded. Then, I came to look for you. What about Lady Mira and Lady Lysana? Xuanai panicked. Are the 2 ladies all right? Mira and Lysana are fine. Don't worry. Noah held Xuanai's hand and motioned for her to calm down. Lasana's mana was drained, but that's it. As for Mira, she should be in a competition now. Nothing happened that you need to worry about. Competition? Xuanai was surprised. Then Sir Noah, all right. I know you have a lot of questions. Noah sighed. I will explain everything to you. Don't worry. Xuanai nodded uneasily. Then, Noah explained what happened after Xuanai fainted. Knowing that Noah gave up on participating in the Great Demon Battle exhibition because of her, Xuanai's face paled. Chapter 1706. Seeing that Xuanai's face had lost all color, Noah was shocked. Xuanai, what happened to you? Are you not feeling well? Xuanai didn't care about Noah's question. Her body started to shrink, and her face became paler and paler. Originally, Xuanai was sitting on the ground and leaning against the wall. The moment she shrank her body, Xuanai was like a helpless child, shrinking into a ball. My fault. Xuanai hugged her knees, her eyes starting to lose focus. It's all my fault. At this moment, Xuanai's heart was filled with despair. As mentioned before, Xuanai was a weak and self-abased young lady. Actually, in Xuanai's eyes, she had always been a person who brought misfortune to others. Since young, the people who accompanied Xuanai, those who were friendly to Xuanai, almost none of them had a good ending. For example, Xuanai's family met with misfortune. In the end, only Xuanai escaped. Another example, Noah saved Xuanai and gave Xuanai a new life. In the end, on Sky Wolf Island, Noah also encountered Aconarolia. Together with his companions in the guild, they were all frozen for an entire 7 years. Misfortune after misfortune, disaster after disaster, they all happened to the people around Xuanai. In this way, how could Xuanai not feel inferior? And this time, Xuanai finally found a new home and was warmly accepted by the people of Fairy Tale. In the end, because of Xuanai, Noah not only agreed to not participate in the Great Demon Martial Arts competition, but also stayed here to accompany her, leaving her companions in Fairy Tale to fight alone. If because Noah didn't participate in the competition, Fairy Tale lost this year's Great Demon Martial Arts competition, then who was to blame? Noah and the others suffered for 7 years, protecting their companions in the guild with difficulty, and their wish to regain their former glory was broken. Then who was to blame? Thinking of this, Xuanai could only think of one reason. It's all my fault. Xuanai seemed to have lost her soul, muttering helplessly and hopelessly. It's all my fault. In the endless self-blame, Xuanai thought of Mira and Lisana again. In the attack last night, in order to save Xuanai and Lisana, Mira pushed the 2 girls away and was trapped by the black fog. If it wasn't to save Xuanai and Lisana with Mira's strength, Mira wouldn't have been trapped so easily. Then, all of mana, she and Xuanai's. That's also my fault. Xuanai hugged his head and muttered in pain. Those who follow me will all meet with misfortune, will all. Xuanai's right eyes, S's color, S hers, S's face. Her, S writes is. Her. Xuanai, nai. It's my fault. Xuanai acted as if he didn't hear anything and muttered in a daze. It's all my fault. Noah was speechless as he watched Xuanai fall into endless self-blame. He raised the hand that was grabbing Xuanai's slender shoulder and held Xuanai's cheek, raising Xuanai's face to face him. Xuanai. Noah looked into her eyes. Look at me. However, Xuanai still didn't react to Noah's words. Her eyes were still unfocused. If this continued, Noah felt that Xuanai would lose all her emotions. That wasn't a joke. Magic came from the heart. Therefore, this was also one of the reasons why Noah lost control of his magic power when he was a child, when he was irritable. Of course, it was the same for others. Mira, for example, had come into contact with demons when she was young and awakened a magic that could receive demonic power. That was another example. If Mira hadn't met Noah at that time and joined Fairy Tale, she would have lost her heart sooner or later. She would have been devoured by magic and become a real demon. Now, Xuanai's heart was filled with negative emotions. It was also possible that her magic would go out of control, and she would become a walking corpse. Xuanai, Xuanai. Noah patted Xuanai's cheeks, but it didn't have any effect. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "You idiot!" As soon as he finished speaking, Noah abruptly held up Snow's face and lowered his head. In the next moment, Noah kissed Xuanai and captured her lips. Xuanai's eyes widened. The sudden forceful kiss finally caused this young lady, who had nearly lost her mind, to recover. Her unfocused eyes once again began to gather. Her eyes were filled with disbelief as she looked at Noah's face, which was just inches away from her. At this moment, Noah pried open Xuanai's lips and teeth with ease. He captured the tip of Xuanai's tongue and rolled it up with his tongue like a madman. Xuanai's body went limp. She pressed her hands against Noah's chest and weakly endured Noah's domineering kiss. Her heart began to tremble. The intimate contact with the person she longed for caused Xuanai's mind to go blank. Her face that had originally lost its color gradually became rosy, and even her breathing began to become a little rapid. Under such circumstances, Xuanai passively endured Noah's powerful kiss. Her tongue was tightly entangled by Noah, and she couldn't resist at all. Before long, Xuanai began to feel suffocated. Only then did Noah let go of Xuanai and let go of her lips. Xuanai stared blankly at Noah's face that gradually moved away. She subconsciously raised her hand and covered her mouth. She looked at Noah as if she was dreaming. She still couldn't believe it all. Of course, Xuanai didn't dislike Noah. Rather, it was the opposite. She even felt that she wasn't good enough for Noah. Now, after being kissed by Noah in such a domineering way, Xuanai only felt like she was dreaming. Everything became extremely unreal. However, Noah held Xuanai's face and made her look at him. He stared in her eyes and said, "Listen carefully." Listen carefully. Your so-called saying that you will bring misfortune to the people around you, in my opinion, is simply the world's biggest joke. Xuanai was stunned. Let's not talk about the past for now. But right now, I can tell you very clearly that even if you can bring misfortune to others, it has no effect on me at all, Noah said firmly. I have to shoulder the misfortune of thousands of worlds, and I have to fight against the source of all misfortune. Even so, the world still cares for me and has never let any misfortune happen to me. You want to affect me with your misfortune alone? Don't make me laugh my head off. Xuanai didn't understand Noah's words at all. However, Xuanai was not an idiot. She still understood one thing. That was, Noah seemed to be carrying something that was even heavier than her misfortune alone. It was so heavy that Xuanai couldn't even imagine the responsibility. I will only say it once, so you have to listen carefully. Undoubtedly, you have to listen clearly. Noah looked straight into Xuanai's eyes that were shaking because of her wavering. The person who decided not to participate in the Great Demon Battle exhibition was me. The person who decided to stay here with you was also me. Although you are part of the reason, it is not entirely your fault. If you continue to blame yourself like this, then I will really get angry. Sir Noah. Xuanai looked at Noah in a daze and said almost subconsciously, "But the people who are with me will all have misfortune. The closer the person is to me, the more misfortune will happen. It has always been, so that is a joke." Noah's hand that was holding Xuanai's face tightened slightly. If that is really the case, then I would like to see what kind of misfortune will happen to me who is close to you. After saying that, Noah lowered his head again and captured Xuanai's lips. Their tongues intertwined. This time, Xuanai was completely intoxicated. She timidly and uneasily responded to Noah's domineering kiss. Her heart was lost. Chapter 17:07. In the dragon graveyard that was so dark that not a single ray of light could be seen, the cold air spread slightly, as if it symbolized eternity, making the space present an indescribable, deathly stillness. However, the cold air and the eternal, deathly stillness did not extinguish the warmth of the man and woman in this space. Instead, the two of them felt a different kind of heat from the surroundings. His breath hit the air, causing that small area of air to gradually become scorching hot. Noah and Shwe Nai hugged each other, leaning against the rock wall in the deepest part of the cave. They felt each other's heartbeat, not feeling that this space was very cold at all. Noah kept hugging Shwe Nai like this, caressing her soft hair while kissing her smooth cheeks and lips, making Shwe Nai's delicate body tremble slightly. Shwe Nai could only respond passively, feeling like she was in a dream. Her beautiful face was slightly red, leaning in Noah's embrace, as if she did not have the slightest bit of strength, not moving at all. After maintaining this state for who knew how long, Noah finally stopped, gazing at Shwe Nai's moist eyes and slightly red face, softly saying, "Now, our relationship is close enough, right?" Being stared at by Noah's pitch-black deep eyes, Shwe Nai's beautiful face became redder and redder as she lowered her head in embarrassment, feeling shy and ashamed. "Sorry, Lord Noah," Shwe Nai said softly. "I actually showed such a weak appearance in front of you. I really don't have the face to see you again. There is no need to feel ashamed." Noah continued to stroke Shwe Nai's head and said, "Although there is nothing wrong with being strong, being weak is not a sin. You're only an ordinary girl. Sometimes, learning to rely on others is very important." "Is that so?" Shwe Nai nodded as if she did not fully understand, softly murmuring, "I feel like I've been saved by Lord Noah again." Noah smiled faintly, extended his hand, and gently brushed it across Shwe Nai's lips, speaking frankly, "There is nothing bad about it, right? No matter when, a kiss from a beautiful girl is the best gift to any man. I have indeed received this gift, haven't I?" "How? How can that be?" Shwe Nai's pretty face reddened again, and she said with some panic, "For someone like me, even if Lord Noah dotes on me so much, it can't be considered a thank you gift." "Oh." Noah raised his eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "In other words, a kiss isn't enough to thank me? How are you going to thank me?" With that, Noah moved his mouth close to Shwe Nai's ear and whispered in a low voice, "For example, give me something more important than a kiss? Something more important than kissing." Shwe Nai's heartbeat began to speed up, and her face was already completely red. In the end, Shwe Nai could only mutter in a voice even softer than a mosquito, If Lord Noah thinks that someone like me can do it." At this point, Noah should have understood Shwe Nai's intentions no matter how stupid he was. Obviously, at this point, no matter what Noah wanted to do to the girl in his arms, she wouldn't have any objections. In short, Shwe Nai's current state was in a state where Noah could do whatever he wanted to her. And Noah wasn't Lu Xiaohui, so it was impossible for him not to be moved. It's a pity that the location isn't right. Noah pinched Shwe Nai's little nose, who was extremely shy. "Let's do the rest after we return." Hearing this, Shwe Nai finally remembered what kind of environment they were in and what kind of situation she was in and what kind of words she said. Thus, shame surged into Shwe Nai's heart all of a sudden, making her feel too ashamed to face anyone. She could only speak with a red face. Then let's hurry back. Noah was a little embarrassed and said teasingly, "Are you that anxious to give yourself to me?" "No, it's not like that." Shwe Nai shook her head with a red face. I mean, we should hurry back now. My companions are still in the competition." "That's right." Noah stopped smiling and raised his head to look up. "My companions are in the competition, so leave the rest to me." Shwe Nai was a little shocked and asked with uncertainty, "Lord Noah, are you not going back to the competition? Alusha and the rest are enough for the competition." Noah narrowed his eyes. Compared to the competition, the inside story of the Great Demon Battle Exhibition is undoubtedly more important. I have to find out what's going on with the solar eclipse plan. Otherwise, there might be a disaster that will drag everyone into it. Does Lord Noah intend to stay here? Shwe Nai asked after a moment of silence. Until after the Great Demon Battle Exhibition is over? That's right. Noah nodded. That guy named Law seems to be planning something. For this reason, he did not hesitate to expose himself in front of me, capture you here, and threaten me with death. He definitely has a big plan. Moreover, behind him, there seems to be the shadow of the kingdom. This year's Great Demon Battle Arts Exhibition Tournament is full of mysteries. If these mysteries are not solved, no one knows what will happen. Originally, it would take a lot of effort to solve these mysteries, but that guy called Law is just too confident. He seems to think that once the Great Demon Battle Exhibition is over and his plan succeeds, then I will no longer be able to do anything. Noah pursed his lips and smiled. So, as long as I stay here, that guy will definitely confess everything to me when the Great Demon Battle Exhibition is over. Since that's the case, there's no need for me to investigate on my own. I'll just wait for him to reveal everything himself. But what about the Great Demon Battle Exhibition? Xue and I asked worriedly. Without Noah, Sama's participation, can the lords in the guild win? It should be known that in this year's Great Demon Battle Exhibition, not only is there the Saber-Tooth, who has always been the champion in the past, but there are also unimaginably strong enemies in the other guilds. For example, in this year's Great Demon Battle Exhibition, only Noah can firmly suppress the Saber-Tooth of the Lamia scale. Another example is Kagura of the Mermaid Heel, who is known as the strongest sorcerer in this year's Great Demon Battle Exhibition besides the Saber-Tooth. Her strength must be very strong. In the other guilds, like the Cotter Cerberus, there are also S-rank sorcerers who can compete with Alusha. And although the sorcerers of the Blue Pegasus aren't very strong, the application of magic is very diverse and suitable for all kinds of situations, so they can't be underestimated. In addition, there is also the Raventail, who is secretly watching the fairy tale. Without Noah's participation, the situation won't be very good, right? In this regard, Noah has a different opinion. Maybe without my participation, the situation won't be as smooth as before, but that doesn't mean that our guild situation is very bad. Noah said, although the Saber-Tooth is very strong, Lax's should be able to barely match him. Kagura naturally can't be ignored, but we also have Alusha and Mira. Although the other guilds are also difficult to deal with, it's a pity that in terms of difficulty, our guild is definitely not weaker than the other guilds. As for the Raventail, Noah smiled indifferently. That guild no longer exists. No longer exists? Yukino suddenly froze. Noah didn't explain and just hugged the weak and cute girl. He raised his head and looked up, the corners of his mouth rising little by little. Presumably, the Great Demonic Combat Arts Exhibition will cause quite a bit of chaos because of Raventail's absence, right? Yukino blinked, obviously not understanding. However, Noah's trust in the guild also affected Yukino, making her feel relieved and silently cheering for her guild. Chapter 17:08. Just as Noah expected, because Raventail had not arrived for a long time, everyone in the venue was talking about it. In the two contestant areas of Fairy Tale, everyone had gathered together to discuss this matter. In the end, there was only one conclusion that everyone came to. It seems that something must have happened to Raventail. Alusha said, thoughtfully, if the person who attacked Mira and Lee Sena yesterday and took Shu and I away is Raventail, then the reason why that guild is not here is most likely that Noah has taken care of them, right? This was the conclusion that everyone came to. After all, this was the only conclusion that was consistent with the current situation. But if that's the case, Noah, who has taken care of Raventail, should be able to come back. Grace said, now, Noah hasn't come back yet. There should be a deeper reason, right? In other words, Lucy hesitated for a while and said tentatively, the whereabouts of Noah and Raventail are unknown. It's very likely that they are together now, or even fighting. How could that be the reason? Gadjaloo curled his lips. I don't think a Raventail would be able to hold that guy back for so long. Hearing Gadjaloo's words, everyone looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Obviously, no one believed that the power of the Raventail was enough to keep Noah out for the entire night. There must be a deeper reason for this. It's really troublesome. Nazi held his head and looked unhappy. If you want to have a showdown, why don't you just come and find trouble with us in a fair and square manner? Why do they have to make things so troublesome? It's because there's no chance of winning in a head-on confrontation that those people would do such a thing. Lucy warned. Not C. Don't mess around anymore. The president is already making arrangements. We just need to focus on our game. Lucy is right. Alusha nodded and looked around at everyone. In any case, it's better that Ivan's guild is not here. This way, we don't have to worry about what they will do in secret. However, as soon as this sentence fell, another voice sounded. It's a pity that Ivan's guild is not here. For us, it's not just a good thing. With that said, Makarov, dressed in a suit, walked out of the corridor in front of everyone. There's a piece of news that I don't know if it's good or bad, Makarov said with a serious expression. Because Raventail didn't show up and no one was found at the hotel they were staying at, the organizers have decided to disqualify Raventail from the competition. Everyone immediately burst into laughter. Only Wendy tilted her head and asked in confusion, "But why don't we know if this news is good or bad?" Because after disqualifying Raventail, the number of teams participating in the competition will be reduced to 7. This way, putting aside the competition part, there will be no way to pair up for the duel part. Makarov sighed. So, the organizers have decided to let us combine Team A and Team B and choose a new team to participate in the competition. This news made everyone frown. Combine the teams. That was not a good thing for Fairy Tale, who had the upper hand. After all, originally, if 2 teams participated in the competition together, the chances of winning would increase. Now that they were combined, Fairy Tale's advantage was gone. However, currently, Team A and Team B were in 1st and 2nd place respectively. This was an advantage that could not be ignored. After the combination, how will the points be calculated? Laxus looked at Makarov, crossed his arms, and asked calmly. Although the 2 teams are in 1st and 2nd place respectively, the points won't be the same, right? This has already been decided, Makarov said helplessly. After the combination, we will use the results of the team with a lower score. At this moment, everyone frowned. One must know that Team B had 44 points, while Team A only had 37 points. There was a difference of 7 points. Sabretooth, who was in 3rd place, scored 34 points. If they were to use the results of the team with the lower score, then the gap between Fairy Tale and Sabretooth would be much smaller. It would be very easy for them to surpass each other. Isn't this unfair to us? Zhu Bian said angrily. Even if we combine our teams, we should use the results of the team with a higher score. That's right. Karna also nodded. 2 of our guild's teams have passed the qualifiers and obtained the qualifications to participate in the official competition. Now, they're merging our teams without permission. Not only are they destroying our advantage, but they're also trying to make it even smaller. Are the organizers deliberately suppressing us to make the competition more exciting and suspenseful? Maybe that's part of the reason. Makarov raised his head and looked at everyone present. But the bigger reason should be that the organizers are suspicious of us, right? Suspicious. Everyone was stunned. Only Alusha understood what Makarov meant. I see. Alusha narrowed her eyes. Because Noah wasn't present, the organizers are suspecting that our guild let Noah attack Raventail to eliminate the competition. Is that against the rules? That's right. Makarov stroked his beard. But that's just suspicion at best. So, the organizers didn't disqualify us from the competition. Instead, they let us combine and use the results of the team with the lower score. They are probably trying to cover up this matter. Cover up. Lucy couldn't help but interject. That can't be considered a suspicion, but it's basically confirmed that Noah did something to the Raventail. It can't be helped. Our guild has too many connections with Ivan's guild. Moreover, before the great magic combat arts competition started, Noah and Ivan had an argument on the street. They have enough reason to think that we did it. Makarov spread his hands. Besides, do you really think that Ivan's guild not being present has nothing to do with Noah? Everyone immediately shut their mouths. So, the organizers are already giving us face by not disqualifying us from the competition. Makarov raised a finger. Now, let's regroup the team. So, after some discussion, Lucy, Wendy, Kana, Julian, and Mira withdrew from the competition. A new team was formed by Alusha, Naz, Gray, Gadjaloo, and Laxus. Originally, In terms of combat power, Mira should also be selected, but Mira was still worried about Lysana in the hotel, so she took the initiative to give up her position and return to the hotel to take care of Lysana. After regrouping the team, today's competition could finally begin. And the person who appeared in the competition was Elusha. Elusha, who walked into the venue, suddenly felt a very strong gaze. She raised her head and looked over. She saw that in front of her, Maniba was staring at Elusha, revealing an unpleasant smile, and said so. Without that monster, can the sprite still defeat the tiger? Hearing this, Elusha's eyes flashed, and a strong smile full of determination appeared on her face. It's a pity that our guild is filled with monsters, Sure Fong said, shaking his head. Maniba's eyes narrowed, and her smile became cold. Chapter 1709. The competition had officially begun. However, as soon as Chabadi announced the start of the competition from the rostrum, all the spectators fell silent. They looked at each other with a confused look on their faces. Not only the spectators, but even the magic shooters from the major guilds looked at the battle in the center of the field in amazement. They were somewhat unable to react. Taking a closer look, a huge water ball with a diameter of more than 100 meters was suspended in the air. In the huge water ball, there were two girls in swimsuits. One was wearing a bold red bikini, showing off her perfect figure, but she was looking at Elusha with a dignified face. The other one was wearing a conservative swimsuit, like a training suit. She was floating in the water with a victorious smile on her face. Aside from Elusa and Maniba, the other contestants from the other guilds were lying on the ground outside the giant water sphere. They were also wearing swimsuits, and their bodies were soaking wet. They all had blank looks on their faces. Looking at this strange situation on the platform, Chapati was extremely surprised and puzzled. At the beginning of the competition, except for contestant Elusha from Fairy Tale and contestant Maniba from Sabertooth, all the other contestants fell out of the field and were directly eliminated. What the hell is going on? Chapati's report made all the spectators talk about it. Only Elusha, who was in the water ball, still looked at Maniba with a dignified face and said in a deep voice, "What did you do?" The fourth day of the Great Magic Battle Arts Exhibition was a naval battle. As the name implied, although the battle was not in the sea, the contestants were required to enter the water ball in the center of the venue to fight and find ways to stay in the water ball. Once they were hit by the huge water ball, they were considered to be eliminated. The first person to come out of the water ball was the last person. The second person to be hit out was the second to last person, and so on, until the third person was born when there were only two people left in the water ball. From then on, the special rules were used. The so-called special rule referred to the 5-minute rule. When there were only two people left in the water ball, a 5-minute countdown would begin. Within the next 5 minutes, if one of the remaining two people was hit by a water ball, that person would fall to the last place. If the remaining two did not get hit by the water ball after 5 minutes, then even if one of them was hit, he would still be able to get second place. The organizers probably wanted to make the competition more interesting, so they used such a rule. However, no one expected that. As soon as the competition started, apart from Elusha and Maniba, all the other contestants from the other 4 guilds mysteriously fell out of the water ball. Everyone was puzzled by this unbelievable situation. However, Elusha could feel it clearly. At the start of the match, a very special magic emerged from Maniba's body. Therefore, there was no doubt that all of this was Maniba's doing. In other words, in just a moment, Maniba used a method that even Elusha was not aware of to eliminate the rest of the contestants, and only Elusha remained. To this, Maniba just laughed. "This is my magic, a magic that manipulates space." A magic that manipulates space? Elusha was slightly startled, but she immediately understood. "Don't tell me. You can use magic to manipulate space and teleport as you wish?" "That's it." Maniba raised one hand, and then, on that hand, a wave of space began to vibrate, condensing into a ball of light. "It's not just me. As long as it's within my sight, I can use this magic to move everything I want. Once the competition starts, I'll throw out all those fellows who are in my way. How about that? Very good magic, right? Hearing Meniba's words, the surrounding audience suddenly understood. However, not only did Alusha not feel relieved, her pretty face became more and more tense, and her gaze towards Meniba became extremely sharp. If that's the case, why don't you teleport me out as well? That way you'll win, right? Not just win. As long as Meniba teleported Alusha out now, then, under the rule of 5 minutes, Alusha would directly fall to the last place. For Sabretooth, who had been hostile to Fairy Tale, wasn't this the situation that they wanted to see the most? However, Meniba teleported the rest of the contestants out, but left Alusha alone and didn't teleport her out, letting the 5 minutes continue to pass. Could it be that Meniba wanted to humiliate Alusha by teleporting her out at the last moment of the 5 minutes? Directly teleporting you out and making you the last place, that's not bad. Meniba smiled rather coldly. Unfortunately, that'd be too boring. Boring? Alusha's pair of eyes began to gradually condense. Is it because of this reason that you deliberately let me stay? That's right, Meniba admitted frankly, but the words that came out of her mouth made people's hearts turn cold. Isn't your fairy tale very powerful? Isn't there an existence that humans can't compare to? But you can't be thinking of taking the title of the strongest from us by yourself, right? Then let me see what kind of ability you have. Our Sabretooth is the strongest. Meniba looked at Alusha with extremely cold eyes. Want to take away our title of the strongest? Just a little fairy, don't be too complacent. The audience suddenly became silent. Alusha just stared at Meniba. After a long while, she relaxed her body, and her eyes became sharp. You didn't teleport me out of the arena at the first moment, but you still openly explained the effect of your magic to me. Who is the one who is complacent? I'll prove it to you. As soon as her voice fell, clank, Alusha's body suddenly bloomed with dazzling light. Seeing this scene, Meniba's smile became vicious. She raised one hand, and a wave of magic light gathered in her hand, emitting bursts of spatial fluctuations. At this moment, Alusha, whose whole body bloomed with dazzling light, moved. Accompanied by a faint sound of breaking through the air, Alusha's figure disappeared in place, turning into a dazzling light shadow. With an extremely terrifying speed, she drew a perfect arc in the water and violently shot toward Meniba's direction. Meniba, who was preparing to slowly torture Alusha to vent her anger, was shocked. However, before Meniba could react, the light shadow rushed to her back and fiercely hit Meniba's body. Bang! Even in the water, a muffled sound could be clearly heard. Meniba, who suffered a heavy blow, directly spat out the air in her mouth, and her whole body flew backward. After a while, she reacted, trying to stabilize her body, and suddenly raised her head and looked forward. There, Alusha's figure slowly appeared from the dazzling light. However, Alusha's red bikini swimsuit had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an animal costume. It was a costume that looked like a cat and a leopard, with animal ears on the head. Wearing this animal costume, Alusha held 2 knight swords in her hands, and a pair of eyes suddenly opened. Then, under Meniba's gaze, she turned into a phantom, like an arrow leaving the bow, and once again violently shot out. That speed was just like a torpedo in the water, leaving only a faint trace, and stirring up a surge of water. Meniba turned pale with fright and directly swept over her body. Poochie! In the tearing sound, a sword light cut through Meniba's side abdomen, and Meniba let out a scream. Chapter 17:10. What? In the contestant area of Sabretooth, Sting, Logue, Lucifer, and Olga watched as Meniba's side was slashed by the sword light in the water ball. They all turned pale with fright as Meniba let out a cry of pain. On the contrary, when the audience saw the sudden change in the situation, they all began to cheer. Under such circumstances, in the water ball, Alusha, who was dressed like a wild animal, directly turned into a flash of light. Like lightning, She repeatedly dashed through the water at a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. It was as if she came from all directions, and the sword light slashed Meniba's body one after another. Poochie, poochie, poochie. A series of tearing sounds resounded. Ah! Meniba's scream resounded. After being slashed repeatedly by Alusha, who had turned into a flash of light, Meniba felt a sharp pain all over her body. This girl with a somewhat twisted personality, whose face was covered with heavy makeup, began to show a trace of pain. The sharp pain from all over her body finally made Meniba react. She tightly bit her lips, and her face twisted. Damn it! After angrily shouting, Meniba fiercely spread out her hands, and a wave of magic light fluctuated in her hands. Suddenly, one wave of magic light after another appeared around Alusha, who had turned into a flash of light. Moreover, the magic inside began to riot. In the next moment, the magic light waves exploded one after another. Bang, 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 bang. Accompanied by a series of explosions, the magic light waves turned into the most direct impact. Like bombs, they exploded one after another, setting off waves of turbulence in the water. Not only could Meniba's magic be used to control space, but she could also change the properties of the space that her magic was used on. For example, if he added the fire attribute, like just now, the space controlled by Meniba would directly turn into heat and explode like a bomb. The destructive power and lethality would be very strong. However, in the face of those continuous explosions, Alusha was like a flash of lightning. She was extremely fast, constantly dodging the exploding space. She was flashing in the turbulence and wasn't affected at all. So fast, Meniba's expression changed. At this moment, Alusha swept through space again. The knight's sword in her hand suddenly flashed, and the sword light once again slashed through Meniba's body. Poochie, with another tearing sound, Meniba's shoulder was fiercely slashed. The sharp pain assaulted her mind, causing Meniba to scream out in pain. For a moment, Meniba was completely unable to do anything to Alusha. She endured the slashes from all directions and continuously let out miserable cries. How? How is this possible? In the contestant area of Sabertooth, Sting tightly grasped the railing, his eyes full of disbelief. Milady can't even fight back against that Alusha Shukalito. No, the problem lies with Alusha Shukalito's armor. Lucius' expression became serious. Alusha Shukalito uses magic to change equipment. She can change equipment at will. Right now, the armor she's wearing is called flying armor. It can increase the user's speed by several levels. So, Milady's magic can't catch up with that woman. Oligo was also shocked. Is that Alusha Shukalito really that strong? Alusha Shukalito is indeed very strong, but in my memory, she's not strong enough to make Milady unable to fight back. Lucius stared at the huge water ball in midair and said in a deep voice, "There must be some other reason." Rog also stared at the water ball that was constantly transforming into flashes of light that swept past Meniba's body. After a while, Alusha suddenly widened her eyes as she slashed at Meniba's body one after another, causing sword lights to shoot out from all directions and slash at Meniba's body. After a long while, she suddenly opened her eyes wide. Alusha Shukalito's weapon isn't an ordinary weapon. Hearing Roger's voice, everyone was shocked. It wasn't until this moment that they realized with difficulty. In Alusha's hand, which was constantly sweeping through space like a flash of light, one of the two knight swords looked like a fish's fin. It was dark green all over. That's... Lucius said in shock. In my memory, that seems to be a weapon that goes with Sea Emperor's armor. As soon as this was said, everyone immediately understood. Alusha didn't just use the flying armor that could provide super high speed. She also used the Sea Emperor's armor that had a great resistance to water. That water attribute magic weapon completely cut through the resistance and pressure of water, allowing Alusha to walk as if she was walking on flat ground and could increase her speed by several levels. On the contrary, Meniba was hindered by the resistance of water and her movements were somewhat sluggish. with one increasing and one decreasing. Maniba simply couldn't adapt to Alusha's super high speed and could only passively endure the attacks. Pucci, the sword light, was like lightning. With the support of the flying armor, it quickly slashed through Maniba's body, causing Maniba to be heavily injured and covered in cuts and bruises. In the midst of the screams, Maniba heard Alusha's indifferent voice. If you had used your magic to teleport me out from the beginning, then I definitely wouldn't have been able to beat you in this battle. Unfortunately, you were too confident in your own strength and your own advantages. Now, your magic can't catch up with me at all, and in the water, you can't be unaffected like me. This is the result. Your arrogance led to your defeat, Maniba. While speaking, Alusha, who had turned into a flash of light, suddenly flashed behind Maniba. Her body spun, and one of her legs was like a whip, violently lashing out. Along with a surge of water, it heavily whipped Maniba's side waist. Bang! In the midst of the muffled sound, Maniba screamed again. Her whole body was sent flying by the powerful leg whip. In the end, Maniba flew out of the water ball and fell heavily on the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. The battle is over. Chapati immediately raised the microphone and announced loudly. On the fourth day of the Great Demon Martial Arts Competition, the reorganized team, Fairy Tail, won first place in the sea battle. In the water ball, Alusha, who was wearing the flying armor, raised the Sea Emperor's sword high in the air, causing the entire audience to burst into enthusiastic cheers, welcoming the victory. Compared to the loud cheers from the audience, the contestant area of Sabretooth was silent. Impossible, Sting murmured, as if he had lost his soul. Miss actually lost. Rog, Lucius, and Olyago were also silent. It was no wonder that their performance was so unbearable. First of all, they had already determined that Fairy Tail, without Noah, was no match for Sabretooth. Now, after being slapped in the face by Alusha, these people were already dumbfounded. Secondly, Maniba, who could control space magic, was the strongest sorcerer in Sabretooth. Even Sting and Raga the Twin Dragons were no match for her. How could Sting and the others believe their eyes that Maniba was so easily defeated by Fairy Tail? Maniba, who was lying on the ground, looked at the sky in disbelief and murmured, "I lost." These words were buried in the rising and falling cheers of the crowd. And the cheers were simply the biggest mockery for Maniba, who was defeated by Alusha because of her carelessness. At that moment, Maniba raised her head and looked at Alusha, who was holding her weapon high in the water ball and enjoying the cheers of the audience. In her eyes, there was unimaginable rage and viciousness. Alusha, Chocolito. Chapter 17:11. Without a doubt, after this round, Alusha was thoroughly hated by Maniba. However, no matter how much Maniba hated Alusha, this twisted and self-belittling girl still couldn't change the fact that she was defeated by Alusha because of her arrogance. Therefore, in this battle, Alusha successfully helped Fairy Tail obtain a valuable 10 points. Although Maniba lost because of her arrogance, she still managed to last past the 5-minute time limit. So Sabretooth didn't fall to the last place and obtained the second place of this battle, obtaining 8 points. Even though he had gotten second place, Sabretooth's self-esteem had once again been torn to shreds. Originally, Sabretooth thought that if Noah wasn't here, no one would be able to threaten their victory. Because of this battle, Sabretooth's spirit was once again severely damaged. Perhaps they really couldn't learn their lesson. Even at this stage, Maniba and her party still didn't think that a single fairy tale could really suppress a Sabretooth. Therefore, they decided to get back at the Sabretooth part of the duel. Unfortunately, in the end, this group of people was once again severely defeated. Due to the combination of Fairy Tail and Raven Tail's absence, the duel section was divided into 3 rounds. Different from the previous 3 days, the 4th day's duel section was a group duel. 2 people from each group would be selected to fight in pairs. After the 3 group duels, the results were as follows. The first duel was between the Blue Pegasus and the Cotter Cerberus. The result was that the Blue Pegasus won and obtained 10 points. The second duel was between Lamia Scale and Mermaid Heel. The result was a tie, with both sides winning 5 points. The third duel was a perfect example of what it meant to be enemies on a narrow road. Fairy Tail versus Sabertooth. Players: Naz Gadgeloo versus Stinglog. In other words, it was a duel between 4 Dragon Slayer Archmages. As far as the process was concerned, this duel was quite interesting. Not to mention anything else, Sting and Log were indeed not weak. 2 of the 5 most powerful magic shooters in the previous Great Demon Combat Arts exhibition matches. Justin and Log were at least much more powerful than Naz and Gadgeloo during the S-Rank Magic Shooter Advancement exam. However, after 3 months of cultivation, Naz and Gadgeloo could really be said to be reborn. Their strength had increased to the point that even their companions in the guild were surprised. Therefore, Naz and Gadgeloo almost completely defeated Sting and Log. They won the battle without any injuries and won another 10 points. In the end, the whole day, the rankings almost didn't change, but the gap between the teams' scores was widened. First place, Fairy Tail, 57p. Second place, Sabertooth, 42p. Third place, Mermaid Heel, 39p. Fourth place, Lamia Scale, 36p. Fifth place, Blue Pegasus, 29p. Sixth place, Cotter Cerberus, 14p. At this point, the 4th day of the Great Demon Combat Arts competition ended. On the other hand, Fairy Tail completely defeated Sabertooth on this day, pulling the gap between them to 15 points. Without the monsters, could the fairy still defeat the tiger? There was no need to answer McNeba's question. Thus, on this day, the pride of the entire Sabertooth magic shooters was torn to shreds, which gave Lucius and Olga a new idea. Perhaps, this time, the title of the strongest guild in the Fiori Kingdom was really not fated with Sabertooth. After all, the Great Demonic Battle Show had entered the real late stage. The end of the 4th day meant that the 5th day was coming. At this time tomorrow, the outcome would be revealed. However, facing Fairy Tail, would Sabertooth really be able to win tomorrow? No one knew about this. There was only one thing that could be confirmed. That was, as the Great Demonic Battle Show went on, an unknown plan was also going on. Night, who knew how many times it had fallen? In the palace, in Emerald's room, the princess of the Fiori Kingdom was standing by the window like before, looking at the night sky outside, her delicate face full of worry. At this time, the door was pushed open, and Alcardios walked into the room. Looking at Emerald, who was standing by the window, he was silent for a while, then suddenly opened his mouth. The 4th day of the Great Demonic Battle Show has ended. After tomorrow, the results will be out. Yes. Emerald's small hands slowly clenched as she whispered. At that time, whether or not the solar eclipse plan will be carried out will depend on the results of the Great Demonic Battle Show. Whether or not it is carried out, we must be prepared. Alcardios said. The magic collection is basically complete. Now we only need the power of the Star Elf Archmages. To be more precise, it should be the power of the keys of the 12 Zodiac Gates. Emerald turned around and looked at Alcardios. Sir Alcardios, how are the 2-star elf archmages in the guild now? Hearing this, Arcadio's expression turned solemn and serious. I was just about to report this matter to the princess. What? Emerald suddenly became nervous. Could it be that there is a problem? Yes, Alcardios said with a serious expression. Of the 2-star elf archmages in the guild, one of them suddenly disappeared, and even the one who was beyond the human range also disappeared. What? Emerald was slightly surprised and quickly asked. Why is it like this? The reason is still under investigation. Alcardios hesitated for a moment and then said, However, I found that the lock on the Eclipse Gate seems to have been unlocked a little. The lock on the Eclipse Gate was unlocked. Emerald was more and more surprised. But to unlock the Eclipse Gate, one must use the keys of the 12 Zodiac Gates. Yes. Alcardios looked at Emerald and said. So, someone must have used part of the keys of the 12 Zodiac Gates to unlock the Eclipse Gate. Feitsue's complexion suddenly became somewhat uncertain. After a while, Emerald raised her head and looked at Alcardios. Let's go. Let's go to the Eclipse Gate. At the same time, in the Dragon Graveyard, Noah and Xuan were still hugging each other with their eyes closed as if they were resting. At a certain moment, Noah's ears moved slightly. He opened his eyes and looked forward. There, a person in a black robe slowly walked over and stopped in front of Noah. Xuan seemed to have noticed the footsteps and quickly opened her eyes. Under the gaze of Noah and Xuan, the black-robed person reached out and lifted the hood of the cloak. Looking at the appearance that appeared under the hood, Noah and Xuan were shocked almost at the same time. Lucy! It was Lucy! However, the other party lowered her head and spoke with a trace of vicissitudes of life on her face. I'm not the Lucy of this era. Not the Lucy of this era. Noah and Xuan were both startled. Under such circumstances, the other party looked straight at Noah and said this. I am from the future. Chapter 17:12. This was a very vast space. Moreover, it was located in the Palace of Coloches. At first glance, this vast space looked like a hall. However, the size of this hall was not only comparable to an ordinary palace, but it also had an indescribable sense of solemnity. Even if it was said to be the palace of the king, there would definitely be people who would believe it. Unfortunately, this vast and solemn hall was completely empty. There was nothing in it at all. No, it should be said that apart from one thing, there was nothing else in this vast hall. That thing was a door. A very grand and tall door. Its height alone reached more than 10 meters. It was engraved with the sun, moon, and stars, as if it was written with the truth of heaven and earth. Located in this hall, under the contrast of this very mysterious door, the solemn atmosphere in the air was particularly strong. Obviously, this was a place that not just anyone could enter. It was filled with an incredible sense of silence. At a certain moment, a series of footsteps began to sound. Emerald and Alcardios entered this vast hall together, came to the front of the magnificent door, and went straight to a device next to the door, then stopped in front of the device. Emerald looked at the device with a very serious gaze. The more she looked, the more serious Emerald's expression became. In the end, Emerald came to a conclusion. Yes, the lock was indeed open a little. Without a doubt, someone must have used the key of the 12 zodiac gates to do this. And the person who can do this, besides me and the princess, is probably only that person. Alcardios continued Emerald's words. The person who suggested to the princess to use the solar eclipse plan to save the future. The person from the future. This was not a joke, nor was it an exaggeration. At least, Emerald and Alcardios knew that the so-called person from the future was completely valid. As long as he borrowed the power of the door in front of him, he could do this. Once opened, he can enter the torrent of time and freely travel back to the past the solar eclipse. Alcardios looked at the magnificent door in front of him and said as if talking to himself, "Through this door, from the future to this era, no one knows better than him how to open the lock of the door." Feitsue heavily nodded her head and fell into her own memories. When did that person from a future come to this era? As for the specific time, Feitsue also didn't know. Feitsue only knew that the person from the future suddenly appeared in front of her one day and brought her a shocking news. July 7th, X791. During this period of time, there will be 10,000 dragons attacking this country. This country and this era will be destroyed. Emerald whispered. The only way to avoid this is to gather mana and open the Eclipse Gate. Then we can turn the massive mana into a huge cannon that could destroy 10,000 dragons. We can use this to destroy the huge dragon horde and save this country and the world. This was the reason why Emerald and Alcardios used the Great Magic Battle Show as a bait to hold an annual ceremony that would determine the ranking of the major guilds in the kingdom. They were secretly collecting the magic power of magic shooters from all over the kingdom. The Eclipse Gate that could allow people to freely travel back to the past. Through this gate, That person from the future came to this era and brought the news of 10,000 dragons attacking the kingdom and the world to Fei-Sui. For this reason, Fei-Sui and Alcardios spent 7 years to collect the mana needed to open the Eclipse Gate. This was because the people from the future had told Emerald that other than traveling to the past, the solar eclipse could also use the gathered magic power to launch a cannon. The power of the cannon was enough to destroy 10,000 giant dragons and save the country and the world. In addition to the huge amount of mana needed to open the Eclipse Gate, there was another condition to open it. That was to gather all the keys of the 12 Zodiac Gates and open the Eclipse Gate. This was the reason why there was a legend that once the 12 Zodiac Gates keys were gathered, the power was enough to change fate. As long as the 12 golden keys were gathered and the Eclipse Gate was opened, one could freely travel back to the past and change history and fate. That person from the future told Fei-Sui that in order to change the fate of the world being destroyed by 10,000 dragons, he came from the future. Using the mana he collected for 7 years to launch the Eclipse Cannon and destroy 10,000 dragons. This was the Eclipse Gate's plan. However, Fei-Sui had not decided whether to carry out this plan or not. The reason was simple, because Fei-Sui did not fully believe the words of that person from the future. Logically speaking, the dragons should have perished 400 years ago. Even if there were survivors, there should not be as many as 10,000 dragons. Fei-Sui looked at the tall gate. If that is the case, how could there be 10,000 dragons attacking the kingdom and the world being destroyed? Because of this, the princess has been hesitating whether to carry out the Eclipse Gate's plan or not, right? Alcardios understood Fei-Sui's thoughts. However, the person from the future who spoke to the princess left us a prophecy. That's right. Fei-Sui's eyes flashed. That person from the future said that the great demonic martial arts exhibition will use a very special method to obtain the result. Based on that result, under normal circumstances, it should be impossible to happen. And if such a special result happens, then it can only prove that the words of that person from the future are true. Alcardios said the plan in Fei-Sui's heart. When that time comes, the princess will carry out the solar eclipse plan, open the solar eclipse gate, and be ready to fire the solar eclipse cannons to destroy the 10,000 dragons. For this reason, we must first prepare to open the Eclipse Gate. The mana has been collected, and the only thing left is the key to the 12 Zodiac Gates. Fei-Sui reached out and touched the device in front of her. Now, the lock of the Eclipse Gate has been partially unlocked. Obviously, that person from the future used part of the key. This speculation was basically correct. After capturing Sueno, Law brought the Aries, Gemini, Scorpio, Libra, and Pisces star spirit keys here and opened part of the lock of the Eclipse Gate. Then, Law brought the key back to the dragon graveyard and threw it next to the unconscious Sueno. Noah picked it up and returned it to Sueno. What's going on? Alcardios frowned. Why is the key to Sueno Agulia in the hands of that person from the future? It seems that while we are preparing, that person from the future is also secretly preparing. Fei-Sui whispered. Now, we only need Lucy Heartfilia's key to open this lock completely, and we can open the Eclipse Gate at any time. So, Princess, what should we do now? Alcardios asked. Previously, the princess seemed to have her own ideas, right? Now, we must borrow the power of Lucy Heartfilia. Fei-Sui turned her head and looked at Alcardios. Master Alcardios, can you bring Lucy Heartfilia here and ask her to assist us? I understand. Alcardios nodded. I will personally ask Lucy Heartfilia to assist us. Only then did Fei-Sui's complexion slightly relax. However, whether it was Fei-Sui, Alcardios, or Law, none of them expected this. Law was not the only one who came back from the future. There was another person from the future who came to this era. In the dragon graveyard, Noah and Sueno fell into silence after listening to the news brought by Lucy, who claimed to have never been here. 10,000 dragons. Sueno's voice became a little hoarse. Is that really possible? I know, this matter will not be easily believed. The future Lucy said bitterly. But please believe me, what I said is true. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Chapter 17:13. Noah had 100 ways to deny the news brought by the future Lucy. Just like what Emerald said, 400 years ago, the dragon race had already been wiped out by Acherontia. Even if some survived, there shouldn't be as many as 10,000 dragons that survived. So, this matter was outrageous no matter how he thought about it. In addition, if there really were 10,000 dragons in this world, then humans would have been slaughtered by the dragons long ago. Why did they wait until now to welcome the dragon's attack? Or did the 10,000 dragons live before this? One question after another gave Noah ample reason to doubt Lucy. However, from Lucy's bitter face and painful voice, Noah couldn't arouse the slightest doubt. Therefore, Noah believed her. If you are really Lucy, then we have no reason to doubt your words. Noah looked straight at the future Lucy and said, "But if you came back to this era from the future, then I want to ask, in the future world, under the attack of 10,000 dragons, did we not resist at all?" Resist? The future Lucy's tone became even more bitter. That was 10,000 dragons. How could we resist? Even if there were 10,000 dragons, couldn't we resist? Noah frowned. Did the future me not do anything? Although he didn't know the specific strength of the 10,000 attacking dragons, but 400 years ago, Acherontia alone was able to slaughter the entire dragon race. Even if the strength of those dragons far exceeded that of humans, it shouldn't reach the 4-digit level. Even if there were 10,000 dragons that didn't reach the 4-digit level, with Noah's strength, it shouldn't be impossible to resist, right? After all, 7 years ago in this world, Noah was already comparable to Acherontia. So, if even Acherontia could single-handedly slaughter an entire dragon race, then there was no reason why Noah couldn't do it. According to this, with Noah here, even if 10,000 dragons appeared, they shouldn't be unable to resist. Listening to Lucy's words, the future seemed to only be filled with despair and fear. However, something that Noah didn't expect happened. The future you? Lucy looked at Noah with an extremely hesitant gaze. After a while, she mustered up her courage and said such a sentence. "Although I don't know what the future you did, in the future I know you didn't appear at all. You didn't even exist in fairy tale. What did you say?" Noah was really surprised. "The future me isn't in fairy tale? Not to mention not being there, I haven't even heard of your existence." The future Lucy said with great doubt. "Logically speaking, with how powerful you are, I should have at least heard of you. However, as far as I can remember, the president has never adopted a child, much less a grandson by the name of Noah Dole. Thus, when I returned to this era and saw you, I was also very surprised." The doubt and surprise in the future Lucy's tone was indeed very strong. Moreover, the way the future Lucy looked at Noah was completely like looking at a stranger. She didn't have the kind of intimacy and familiarity that the Lucy in fairy tale looked at Noah. These phenomena all proved a problem. That is, in the era of the future Lucy, there was indeed no such person as Noah in fairy tale. What's more, in that era, whether or not Noah existed was a problem. Regarding this fact, Noah was silent. Although there were more or less complicated feelings in his heart, Noah still understood what was going on. Originally, Noah was not a person of this world, but a transcendent existence born from the fragments of the starting worlds of thousands of worlds in between worlds. The reason why he came to this world was that the worlds that birthed Noah wanted to give Noah a good environment to grow up in, so they sent Noah here. In other words, for this world, Noah shouldn't exist. As a result, because of the world's blessing, Noah came to this world and quietly made some changes in this world. There is no such thing as Noah in the future Lucy's era, probably because the development of that era was the original trajectory of this world. In the era where Noah is now, because of the existence of Noah, has undergone some changes and became independent from the original trajectory of the era. Future Lucy tried to go back to the past through the space-time door called solar eclipse to change her fate, and she happened to come to the era where Noah existed. In other words, the era of Noah and the future Lucy were two different developments in the same world, which was similar to the theory of parallel worlds. It had to be said that this was a very regrettable matter. If Noah existed in the era of the future Lucy, then with Noah's ability, which was too high for this world, he might be able to save everyone and not let the future Lucy's era go to destruction. Looking at the pain and sadness of the future Lucy when she mentioned the future, Noah had enough reason to believe. In the future Lucy's era, everyone in Fairy Tale died. I have a question. Noah looked at the future Lucy and said, "Do you know what Project Solar Eclipse is?" Project Solar Eclipse? The future Lucy was slightly startled and immediately shook her head. "Sorry, I haven't heard of it." Then, the second question, Noah's eyes slowly condensed. "Besides you, is there a second person who came back to this era from the future?" "A second person from the future?" The future Lucy froze and answered almost reflexively. I don't know, but in my era, I was the only one who came to this era through the solar eclipse." Hearing the future Lucy's words, some of the doubts in Noah's heart gradually solved. There is no doubt that this Lucy came back from the future with only one purpose. That is to tell the future of this country and even the world to the people of this era and to save the tragedy of this era. However, Lucy was not the only one who came from the future to this era. The guy who called himself Law once said that if there was no Noah in this year's great demonic combat arts competition, then the result would be doomed. In other words, Law knew very well what the future of this era would be without the existence of Noah. In this way, there was only one thing that could be proven. Law was also a person from the future. Moreover, Law also arranged a plan with the solar eclipse as the center in an attempt to do something. Was it because Law clearly knew that 10,000 dragons were about to attack this world, and this world was heading toward destruction, so he wanted to change that fate? Or did he have other plans? Noah felt that he was getting closer to the truth. At this moment, Shwet and I suddenly hesitated and said so. "Sir Noah, I think from the future, there is more than one person who came to this era." The future Lucy was startled. Noah was also slightly startled and looked at Shwenai. Under Noah's gaze, Shwenai pursed her lips and said in a low voice, "I know the true identity of the person who called himself Law." With that said, Shwenai told Noah a name. Hearing that name, Noah's eyes flashed and fell into silence again. "I'm sorry, although I came to this era from the future, I didn't bring any plan to save this era." The future Lucy suppressed the emotions in her heart and said to Noah emotionally, "But you are so powerful. You must have a way to save this era. I beg you, save this era. Save my companions. Save our future." Hearing this, Noah smiled. "You don't need to say that. I will do that." Chapter 17:14. In the future, when Lucy found Noah and told him what would happen in the future, Noah gradually began to realize the hidden undercurrents of this year's great demonic combat arts exhibition game. Many things were happening outside. First, in order to prepare to open the Eclipse Gate at any time, Alcardios went to the Inn of Fairy Tale, hoping to talk to Lucy. Of course, in the inn, Elusha, Wendy, Naz, and Gray, who were originally in the same group as Lucy, were also present. After some negotiations, the group agreed to discuss with Alcardios, and under Alcardios' lead, they arrived at the location of the Eclipse Gate. There, Alcardios told Elusha and the others a part of the Eclipse plan and hoped to get Lucy's help. However, before Lucy could reply, someone barged in and directly arrested Alcardios, Elusha, and the others. It was the Minister of National Defense of the Fiori Kingdom, Dardan. This Minister of National Defense did not know the true content of the Eclipse plan, but he knew that Alcardios was preparing to open the Eclipse Gate that could travel through time and space. Under such circumstances, Dardan thought that Alcardios was preparing to use the Eclipse Gate to return to the past and then do something to change history, and expressed extremely strong opposition to this. Thus, without knowing the true contents of the solar eclipse plan, The Minister of Defense barged in with his soldiers in order to protect the current history. He directly captured Alcardios and imprisoned the star elven archmage who could open the solar eclipse gate, which was Lucy, as an accomplice. As for Alusha, Wendy, Naz, Gray, and the others, they were all chased out of the palace and sent back to the inn. When the High Mages of Fairy Tale found out about this matter, they were all furious. If it was just to arrest Alcardios, it would have been fine. However, in order to prevent the solar eclipse from taking place, Dutton treated Lucy as an accomplice and imprisoned her. This undoubtedly violated the fairy tale's taboo. Therefore, before dawn, Makarov made arrangements for Naz, Wendy, Mira, Hubby, Xia Lulu, and Li Li to form a team. When the finals of the Great Demon Combat Arts competition began tomorrow, they would sneak into the palace and rescue Lucy. In addition, Alusha, Gray, Gadjaloo, Julian, and Laxes were in charge of attending tomorrow's finals, attracting the kingdom's attention to the Great Demon Combat Arts competition so that Naz and the others could take advantage of the situation and rescue Lucy. As for the others, they continued to search for Noah and Xuanai. Fairy Tale, who had prepared everything properly, did not notice anything. On the top of a building opposite the Fairy Tale Hotel, Law quietly watched the development of all this, and an evil smile gradually appeared on his face. Although a lot of accidents have happened, now history has begun to go on the right track. If it continues to develop like this, the result of tomorrow's Great Demon Combat Arts competition will definitely be the same as the history I know. As a person from the future, Law clearly knows what the result of tomorrow's Great Demon Combat Art competition will be. In order to let Emerald trust him and open the Gate of Eclipse, Law told Emerald the result. If that result appears, it can prove that the future Law said is true, and Emerald will open the Gate of Eclipse. However, Law did not expect that in this era, there would be a person who has no intersection with the history he knows. Noah Dole. Law's expression became uncertain. That guy, who the hell is he? Not only does he not exist in the history that Law is familiar with, but he also has that kind of power beyond the scope of human beings. So Law really has a deep fear of Noah. If this variable that does not exist in history is allowed to continue to be active in the Great Demon Combat Arts competition, then, in the end, the prophecy that Law told Emerald will definitely collapse because of the intervention of Noah, a person who does not exist. At that time, Emerald will no longer help Law open the Gate of Eclipse. If the Gate of Eclipse cannot be opened, then Law's coming to this era will become meaningless. Therefore, Law did not hesitate to take away Xuanai at the risk of angering Noah at any time to restrict Noah and guide history back to the track he is familiar with. And Law's efforts were not in vain after all. Although a lot of things have happened that deviated from the history I know, now, history is finally back on the right track, and my prophecy will definitely be fulfilled. Let Emerald believe my words and open the Gate of Eclipse. Law raised the corner of his mouth. At that time, even if you, Noah Dole, are beyond common sense and stronger than all humans, it will be useless. After leaving this sentence, Law directly turned into a black shadow and disappeared quietly as if blending into the moonlit night. On the other side, in the palace, Emerald, who learned that Alcardios was taken down, hurriedly went to Dutton and told him the real content of the Eclipse plan. What? In Emerald's room, a short old man was shocked. 10,000 dragon generals are attacking the kingdom? How can that kind of thing happen? I know you won't believe it. In fact, I don't believe it either. Emerald closed her eyes. That's why I decided to only prepare to open the Gate of Eclipse until the end of the Great Demon Combat Arts competition. Whether to carry out the Eclipse plan and open the Gate of Eclipse will have to wait for the results of the Great Demon Combat Arts competition. You intend to entrust the future of the kingdom to the results of a festival? Dutton said with a somewhat ugly expression. Princess, isn't that a bit inappropriate? Apart from this, is there anything else we can do? Emerald smiled helplessly. As long as there is a 1 in 10,000 chance that this kingdom will be in danger, we must prepare for the future of this kingdom. Dutton opened his mouth, but no words came out. Whether to carry out the Eclipse plan or not, let's wait for the results of the Great Demon Combat Arts competition to tell me. The helpless smile on Emerald's face turned into an expression full of determination. She stared at the gradually brightening sky outside and said, "Before the results come out, I won't believe any of this. But is the result possible?" Dutton hesitated and said, "Based on the current situation, without Noah Dole's participation, the result that the person from the future mentioned should be very difficult to appear, right? Because it's difficult to appear, once it appears, it can prove that what the person from the future said is true." Emerald looked at Dutton and said very seriously, "So, all we can do is wait for the results to appear." "I understand," Dutton said in a deep voice. "If it's for the future of this kingdom, I will support Her Royal Highness." "Thank you very much for your understanding, Minister." Emerald nodded and immediately, once again, looked at the gradually brightening sky outside. At this time, Emerald's mind was only thinking about the prophecy that Law told her. The sorcerers of the guild fairy tale will defeat their opponents one by one. In the end, they will face Sting of the Saber-Tooth with wounds all over their bodies. All of them will be unharmed, and Sting will kneel down and surrender. This result, no one could have predicted. Because of this, Law's prophecy seemed to be very convincing when it came true. Everything depends on the results of the Great Demon Combat Arts competition. Emerald, who had made up her mind, didn't notice it. In the night sky outside, a figure that looked like a fairy was floating there like a ghost. Looking down, a thoughtful light flashed in her emerald gem-like eyes. "It seems that something incredible has really happened." Mavis looked in the direction of the hotel where Fairy Tale was located. After a while, she smiled sweetly. "There's no other way. Let's go help those children." Chapter 17:15. The next day, as soon as the sun rose, the citizens of Colocas were in high spirits, because today was the finals of the Great Demonic Arts Tournament. After today's tournament, in the following year, the rankings of the various guilds from all over the Fiori Kingdom would be revealed. The citizens of Colocas were very much looking forward to this. Without a doubt, this year's Great Demonic Arts Tournament was much more exciting than the previous ones. In the previous Great Demonic Arts exhibition matches, it was basically Saber-Tooth who was unparalleled. Kara and Leo, who belonged to the Lamia scale, didn't participate in the previous Great Demon Combat Arts exhibition at all. Kagura, who was a member of the Mermaid Heel, had never appeared in the Great Demon Combat Arts Tournament in the past. This way, Saber-Tooth naturally didn't have any strong opponents, and was almost always successful, easily winning the championship every time. Although this made Saber-Tooth's popularity quite high. In terms of the level of excitement of the tournament, it definitely couldn't compare to this year's Great Demonic Arts Tournament. Not to mention, in this year's Great Demonic Combat Arts exhibition, a fairy tale had appeared out of nowhere. So, this year's Great Demonic Arts Tournament was very exciting, and many people were looking forward to it. And the last day of the Great Demonic Arts Tournament was quickly approaching. Today, the cheers of the audience were much louder than the previous days, and people's spirits began to soar. Under such circumstances, the finals of the Great Demonic Arts Tournament began. Unlike the previous days, on the last day of the Great Demonic Arts Tournament, there was no part of the tournament, nor was there a part of the duel, only a competition. Survival battle. The venue of the tournament was the entire Colocas. The teams of the major guilds would be scattered to different corners of Colocas and would be free to move as soon as the tournament began. During the period of movement, there were no restrictions on methods, no restrictions on magic, and when they met, they could either fight or escape. No matter what, in the end, as long as an opponent couldn't continue to fight, they would get 1 point. This point would be added to the total score of each team. In addition, each team would have a captain. The captain's name list was not public. However, when the team leader was defeated, the team that defeated the team leader would receive 5 points, which would also be added to the total score. According to this calculation, when all the contestants in a team were defeated, they would be able to provide a high score of 9 points. defeating all the contestants from other teams. The highest score will be 45 points. Therefore, even if it was Cotter Cerberus, who was currently in last place with only 12 points, they still had a chance to turn the tables and win the game. It was under such rules that the battle for survival unfolded. Unfortunately, not long after the start of the competition, the Blue Pegasus, whose individual strength was not very high, were all eliminated. Not long after, all of the members of the Cotter Cerberus were also eliminated and left the stage. As the tournament progressed, all but one member of the Mermaid Heel was eliminated, with the exception of Kagura, leaving behind only one person. Immediately after, in the Lamia scale, other than Kara, Leo, and Shirley's group, all the other members also left the stage. Next, under the cheers of the audience, the Fairy Tale and the Saber-Tooth were in an all-out battle. First, it was Gray versus Lucifer. The battle between the two magic users was one-sided at first, and Gray was suppressed by Lucifer. In the end, it was Gray who turned the tables and overturned Lucifer, obtaining victory. Next, it was Gadjaloo versus Logue. The duel between the two Dragon Slayer magic users was just like yesterday's duel. Gadjaloo completely crushed Rog, and in the end, he defeated Rog and won. Then, Laxus also encountered Olga. However, just as the duel between the two lightning-attributed mages was about to begin, Kara suddenly appeared and dealt with Olga with a single blow. Without Noah's participation, the strongest sorcerer in this year's Great Demon Combat Arts Drill was extremely powerful. Facing Kara, who was ranked 5th among the top 10 Saint Archmages, Laxus chose to fight. After a hard battle, with his whole body covered with wounds, Laxus defeated Kara with a single blow of the Dragon Slayer mystery, causing the audience to cheer. Then, Gray met up with Julian and encountered Leo and Shiria, who were also in the same team. After a hard battle, he defeated the two. However, what happened next was completely unexpected. Alusha encountered Kagura halfway, and after a wonderful hand-to-hand battle, she was interrupted by Maniba. Because of yesterday's tragedy, Maniba thoroughly hated Alusha. Therefore, during the duel between Alusha and Kagura, Maniba used her space magic to suddenly move behind Alusha and launch a sneak attack. At that time, Alusha didn't notice at all. However, Kagura, who was confronting Alusha, clearly saw Maniba appearing behind Alusha. So, Kagura directly took action and saved Alusha in Maniba's shock. Originally, Kagura was indebted to Noah, and Alusha was Simon's childhood friend who shared weal and woe with him. How could Kagura watch Alusha be attacked? Maniba, who didn't know this, was blinded by hatred. She ignored Kagura's existence and launched a sneak attack on Alusha, but her plan was ruined by Kagura, who disdained such an action. In the end, the furious Alusha and Kagura joined hands and cut down Maniba, defeating this despicable sneak attacker. After that, Alusha and Kagura once again had a fair duel. In the end, Alusha narrowly won and defeated Kagura, winning the duel. At this point, other than Fairy Tale and Saber-Tooth, the rest of the guilds had all left the stage. However, Alusha, Gray, Julian, Gadjaloo, and Laxus were all heavily injured and couldn't even stand properly. Saber-Tooth, on the other hand, only had one person left. That person was Justin. From beginning to end, Justin hadn't engaged in a large-scale battle. Whether it was his stamina or magic power, he was at his peak. Facing a group of opponents who couldn't even stand properly, Justin, who was at his peak, had no reason to lose. However, what happened next made everyone's jaws drop. Facing Alusha's team, Justin had a feeling that he couldn't win no matter what. Under the pressure of that feeling, Justin couldn't help but kneel in front of Alusha's team and choose to surrender. No one could have predicted this result. However, the victory of Fairy Tale still made the entire audience cheer, bringing the curtains to the Great Demon Battle Arts exhibition to an end. In the midst of the cheers that soared into the sky, no one would have thought of that at this moment. It was this shocking result that led to the beginning of the disaster that followed. In the hallway of the palace, Emerald, who was dressed as a Valkyrie, led a large group of people and walked towards the solar eclipse with a serious expression. Next to her, Dayton also had a serious expression and spoke in a deep voice. I didn't expect it to be this result. This can only prove that what the future person said is true. Emerald's eyes flashed with determination. In order to save this country, save this world, I will start the solar eclipse. At the same time, in the dragon graveyard, Noah was looking at a dragon skeleton, thinking about something. At a certain moment, a black shadow flashed behind Noah. Law raised his eyes and looked at Noah, who was looking at the dragon skeleton with his back to him, and said with surprise, "Since you really stayed until now, I thought you would leave. I also thought you wouldn't come, but didn't you come?" Noah turned and looked at Law. "Should I continue to call you Law, or should I call you Roger?" Chapter 17:16. Rog, one of the 5 powerful archmages who belonged to Sabretooth and changed the name of Sabretooth. Not only did he have the magic crystal of Dragon Slayer magic in his body, but he had also been personally taught Dragon Slayer magic by Dragon. He was different from the first-generation Naz, Gadjaloo, and Windy, and also different for the second-generation Laxes. He was known as the third-generation Dragon Slayer Archmage. He really began to take Rog seriously when he found out that he was a Dragon Slayer Archmage like Sting. At that time, Noah only had one impression of Rog: cold. This Dragon Slayer Archmage had a very cold personality. He was usually quite taciturn and only silently regarded defeating Gadjaloo as his goal. Moreover, he had not made a move in the Great Demonic Combat Arts exhibition, but his specific strength was much stronger than Naz, Gray, and Gadjaloo during the S-Rank Archmage promotion exam 7 years ago. This was the information no one knew about Rog. So, I completely did not expect that you were Rog from the future. Noah looked at the evil man who called himself Rog in front of him, but whose real name was Rog, and narrowed his eyes slightly. However, this can explain why the magic aura I feel from your body is so special. When Noah saw the future Rog for the first time, he inexplicably felt that there was something strange about him, which gave him a strange feeling that he was both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Now that he thought about it, there was no doubt that the feeling at that time was because this guy was Rog from the future. Therefore, Noah felt that the future Rog was both familiar and strange. As for that strange feeling, it was probably the Dragon Slayer magic on the future Rog. The magic used by this Dragon Slayer Archmage was the Shadow Dragon Slayer magic. In other words, Rog and the future Rog were both Dragon Slayer Archmages raised by Shadow Dragons. It's just that you've changed a lot. Noah slightly sized up the future Rog. If the feeling you give me in this era is cold, then the feeling you give me now is quite evil. To be more precise, it was rather evil. Noah had always sensed an evil aura from the future Rog's body. That was not the temperament that a kind man or woman should have. In response, future Log only twitched his mouth and said in a non-committal manner, "Time will change a person. I'm no longer the idiot from 7 years ago who only knew how to talk about Gadjaloo and think about how to defeat him." 7 years ago, Noah looked straight at future Log. In other words, you came from 7 years in the future? That's right. Future Log opened his arms and admitted, "I transmigrated from the era 7 years later through the Eclipse Gate." Noah did not seem too surprised when he heard that. Instead, it was the future Rog who was surprised. "You don't seem too surprised." The smile on future Rogue's face slowly disappeared. "What? Haven't you always wanted to know about the Solar Eclipse Project? You said it yourself. I want to know about the Solar Eclipse Project." Noah glanced at future Rogue. "I already know about the solar eclipse. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that you're the future Log. So, I'll skip this part. You just have to tell me what the Solar Eclipse Project is, and that's all." Hearing this, future Rogue frowned slightly. He couldn't help but have some doubts in his heart. Undoubtedly, Noah didn't have any special reaction to the term solar eclipse before, so he should know about the existence and power of the solar eclipse. How did he suddenly know about the solar eclipse? This question only flashed through future Rogue's mind for a moment. Soon after, the future Rog tossed the matter aside and stared at Noah. The so-called solar eclipse plan is to use the mana collected during the 7 years of solar eclipse as a cannon and fire it. After opening the solar eclipse gate, we'll fire the solar eclipse cannons and destroy 10,000 attacking dragons. Destroy 10,000 attacking dragons. Noah was stunned. Solar eclipse has such power? But that's not right. If the solar eclipse really had such power, why didn't the solar eclipse cannons appear in Lucy's future era and destroy 10,000 dragons? Future Rogue didn't know that Noah had such doubts in his mind. He thought that Noah was shocked by the 10,000 attacking dragons. Maybe you won't believe me, but I have to tell you that after today, there will be 10,000 attacking dragons attacking this country. Future Rogue said in a deep voice. That's the real hell, a hell that no one can imagine. In my era, which is 7 years later, the world has been dominated by dragons. Less than 10% of humans survived. Future Rogue closed his eyes. That's why I came to this era from the future and asked Princess Emerald of this country to hold the Great Demon Battle Exhibition to collect the mana needed to activate the solar eclipse. When the dragons attack, the eclipse gate will be opened and the eclipse cannon will be launched to destroy 10,000 attacking dragons and save the future of this era. That's the plan for the solar eclipse. Future Rogue sighed. However, Princess Emerald didn't believe me. In order to make Princess Emerald trust me, I told her about a future I was familiar with. Only when the future I spoke of became true would Princess Emerald believe me. Then, she would open the solar eclipse and carry out the solar eclipse plan to save the future of this world. Hearing this, Noah's heart skipped a beat. The future you're talking about, don't tell me you're referring to the result of the Great Demon Battle Exhibition? That's right. Future Rogue nodded heavily. In the history I know, the Great Demon Battle Exhibition ended in a very special way. Fairy Tale's members were all unharmed, and the other guilds were all defeated. In the end, Sting was at his peak, but he felt that he couldn't defeat your guild, so he knelt down and surrendered. Once this happens, Princess Emerald will believe me and carry out the solar eclipse plan. At this point, the way the future Rogue looked at Noah suddenly changed. However, I didn't expect you to appear at this time. Noah immediately understood what future Rogue wanted to say. Since Noah didn't exist in future Lucy's era, then Noah shouldn't exist in future Rogue's era either. Under such circumstances, if a person who didn't exist in the history that the future Rogue was familiar with suddenly appeared and joined the fairy tale that played a very important role in the future and displayed astonishing power, the future Rogue would definitely panic. After all, with Noah's power, if he continued to be active in the Great Demon Battle Exhibition, the special result of Sting kneeling down and surrendering would most likely not appear. This way, future Rogue's prophecy about Emerald would collapse on its own, and Emerald wouldn't execute the solar eclipse plan. At that time, future Rogue's plan would be completely ruined. Why have I never heard of your existence in my era? I don't really understand. Maybe it's because I've transmigrated to this era and caused some changes in it? Future Rogue said. However, although you're very strong, no matter how strong you are, what can you do against 10,000 dragons? How many dragons can you defeat? 10? 100? Future Rogue shook his head. Unfortunately, your opponent is 10,000 dragons. With your power alone, you can't change the future. Therefore, the solar eclipse plan must be executed, Rogue said resolutely. Because of this, I have to think of a way to make you leave the Great Demon Battle Exhibition and let the outcome of the Great Demon Battle Exhibition develop towards the future I know. All of this is to save this world and save the future. This is what you want to know. I've already told you everything, Future Rogue said sincerely. You should be able to understand my words, right? Noah fell silent. However, in the next second, Noah calmly spoke. Unfortunately, you're lying. Chapter 1717. At that moment, the expression on Future Rogue's face froze. The atmosphere in the space suddenly became heavy, and the temperature around Noah and Rogue seemed to have dropped a little, giving off a feeling that they were ready to draw their swords at any moment. After a while, future Logue spoke with an unpleasant expression. What makes you say that? Don't you realize that your words contradict each other? Noah smirked. You just said that the solar eclipse can gather mana and fire it like a cannon, and that its power is enough to destroy 10,000 dragons, right? That's right. Future Logue nodded. Are you suspecting that the solar eclipse doesn't have such an effect? Or are you suspecting that the solar eclipse doesn't have such power? Basically, I'm suspecting both of these, Noah said as if he didn't notice future Logue's unpleasant expression. If the solar eclipse really has the power to destroy 10,000 dragons, then in your era, you could have used this power to destroy the dragons, right? In my era, less than 10% of the human race was left. Even in this era, it would take 7 years to collect all the mana. How could we possibly collect all of it when less than 10% of the human race was left? The future Logue asked loudly. That's not a reason for you to suspect me, right? You couldn't gather enough mana to activate the solar eclipse in your era. Noah looked at future Logue with a faint smile. If that's the case, how did you come to this era? The future Rogue suddenly froze. Since you were able to pass through the solar eclipse gate and come to this era, it means that you gathered enough mana to activate the gate in your era. Noah laughed coldly. Can't that mana be used to fire the solar eclipse cannon? In my era, the dragons had already taken over the world and were scattered all over the world, future Logue said after a moment of silence. Even if there was enough mana to fire the solar eclipse cannon, it wouldn't be able to destroy the dragons that were scattered all over the world. Are you trying to say that the dragons would only gather at this time and attack the Fiori kingdom? Noah looked indifferent. Then, even if 10,000 dragons were to gather and attack the Fiori kingdom, it would be impossible for the solar eclipse cannon to cover the entire country and eliminate 10,000 dragons, right? Even if it couldn't eliminate all of them, it could at least eliminate most of them. Future Logue's tone became irritated. At this time, we should eliminate as many threats as we can. That way, the danger level would be much lower. I agree with you. Noah looked up and stared at the future Rogue. As long as your real goal is to eliminate 10,000 dragons. Hearing this, the future Rogue's expression darkened, and he sneered. In the end, you just don't trust me. Isn't that obvious? Noah smiled sarcastically. A person who can casually use the lives of 5 players from Raventail as bait to test me, and who can also use his emotions to threaten to kill the survivors of that guild and kidnap my companions without batting an eyelid. How can I believe the words of a person who is filled with evil energy? Not to mention, the so-called 10,000 dragons attack that you mentioned doesn't match the history that you told me before at all. Noah looked around him. You said that 400 years ago, the dragons were wiped out by Aconarolia. But now 10,000 dragons suddenly appeared out of nowhere. That's a contradiction. So, I can only imagine that if what you said is true, how did the 10,000 WYRMS come about? Noah suddenly smiled. For example, what did the dragon's corpses come back to life? Noah then turned his gaze to the future Rog as he spoke. Another example is that, like you, they came from different eras through the Eclipse Gate. When these words came out of Noah's mouth, the heavy atmosphere in the air suddenly exploded. One, black mist surged from future Rogue's body and turned into a black wind. It was like a viscous swamp, but also like a rolling black wave. It surged violently towards Noah. However, in the face of the surging pitch-black waves, Noah merely clenched his fist, and magical veins that looked like electric wires appeared on his arm. He then blasted them forward. Dong! The terrifying power turned into a terrifying shock wave, causing Noah's fist wind to be like a cannonball. It violently collided with the huge black wave that was surging over. With a loud, muffled sound, the huge black wave exploded, scattering in all directions like sparks. However, the black fog that had spread in all directions did not disappear immediately. Instead, it seemed to have blended into the air and spread out, surrounding Noah. Then, future Rogue's voice sounded from all directions. You are indeed an anomaly. Your existence has disrupted the history of this world, causing the future development and the direction of the era to become unpredictable. So, I think there should be a lot of people thanking me, Noah said as he used his sensing ability to search for future rogues' whereabouts. If the determined future and history can't be changed, then let me mess it up. One's own fate must be controlled by oneself. Unfortunately, it's too late. Future Rogue's voice was still echoing in all directions. His actual body could not detect it at all. The results of the great demonic martial arts competition are out. That princess must have started to believe me and is preparing to open the Eclipse Gate. It's too late for you to rush over now. Hearing this, Noah laughed in disdain. Should I call you stupid? Or should I call you stupid? Do you think I've been waiting for you here all this time? Future Rogue's breath stopped. Only now did the future Rogue realize that he had overlooked something of utmost importance. Where's Shu and I? Future Rogue asked in shock. Why is Shu and I missing? Isn't that a matter of course? Noah's eyes glowed brightly. Although before this, I didn't know what Project Eclipse was, nor did I know what you were planning. But since it's called Project Eclipse, then there's no doubt that the core of this plan is a solar eclipse. Future Rogue was shocked when he heard Noah's words. Looks like you figured it out, Noah said mockingly. That's right. Just in case, I've already sent Shu and I to guard the Eclipse Gate. No matter who tries to get close, Shu and I will stop them with all her might. Damn it. Future Rogue cursed angrily. Then, his voice disappeared. However, the surrounding black fog did not disperse and continued to surround Noah. Under Noah's sensing ability, Rogue's aura seemed to cover the entire area of the black fog. However, knowing that Shu and I was guarding the Eclipse Gate and was planning to stop anyone from getting close, Rogue would not stay here. I see. Noah's expression darkened. Only a projection came to see me, but his actual body doesn't dare to come in front of me? That was to be expected. Future Rogue was afraid of Noah to begin with, so why would he personally come in front of Noah and risk his life? It was estimated that the future Rogue was like Jalal in the past, transferring half of his magic power to the body of thoughts in order to deceive Noah's perception. Part of the reason why Noah felt something off about Future Rogue was because of this. In other words, from the very beginning, Future Rogue had never let his actual body appear in front of Noah. The people who came in contact with Noah were only projections that possessed half of Future Rogue's mana. Bang! On the mountain to the east of Koloch's, the ground of the giant egg Flatbird's meeting place suddenly exploded, creating a huge crater in the ground. From within, a ray of light flew out and rushed towards the sky. Then, it shot towards the direction of the palace. Chapter 17:18. Just as Noah had said, Emerald and her party were indeed obstructed. You are. Emerald, who was leading her party, exclaimed in surprise when she saw the girl standing in front of the Eclipse Gate. Shu and I, Agulia? Are you Princess Emerald of the Fiori Kingdom? Shu and I's expression was unusually serious as she looked at Emerald and asked, I'm sorry, I can't let you near the Eclipse Gate anymore. Shu and I's words made Emerald's expression turn from surprise to seriousness. Do you know who you're talking to? Dutton stepped forward and scolded. The one standing in front of you is the princess of the Fiori Kingdom. How dare you obstruct the princess? Sorcerer, we can punish you any time. It doesn't matter. Shu and I replied without hesitation. As long as I can complete Master Noah's orders, even if I have to sacrifice my insignificant life, it doesn't matter. Shu and I's resolute declaration made Dutton's expression stiffen, and he was speechless. Not to mention Dutton, even the soldiers who came with Emerald looked at each other. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. Under such circumstances, Emerald remained silent for a while, and then spoke softly. I can feel that there is not a single bit of falsehood in your words. What an amazing determination. It seems that Lord Noah, who can make you offer up such determination, is not only outstanding in strength, but also in character. But this is not a reason for you to stop us, Emerald said loudly. Miss Shu and I, please step aside. We have a reason to open the Eclipse Gate. If you continue to obstruct us, I'll have no choice but to have you taken down. I've said it before, it doesn't matter. Shu and I raised her hand, and in her hand was a dazzling golden key. Her eyes were filled with determination. But if you don't have the resolve to kill me, then you can't pass me. As she finished speaking, the key in Shu and I's hand emitted a dazzling light. Seeing this scene, the kingdom's soldiers raised the weapons in their hands and pointed them at Yuno. However, Emerald raised her hand and stopped the soldiers from acting rashly. Almost in the next second, a strange phenomenon occurred. The dazzling light emitted from the star elemental key in Xuan Nai's hand suddenly dimmed. Then Xuan Nai sensed it. The mana that he had just instilled into the astral key in his hand suddenly went out of control. Together with most of the mana in his body, it was all pulled away by a force. Well, what? Xuan Nai was shocked. Then, because of the loss of a large amount of demonic energy, her body went soft and she knelt on the ground. Seeing that Xuan Nai was at a loss, Emerald explained, "Since you know this place, you should know that the purpose of our great demon martial arts exhibition is to gather mana for the solar eclipse. Meanwhile, this is the location of the solar eclipse gate. If you use spells in front of the solar eclipse gate, all of the mana available will be sucked away. You won't be able to fight here." Xuan Nai's pretty face suddenly changed. If you can't use magic, no matter how powerful you are as a magic shooter, you're just an ordinary girl. Dutton shook his head. "Unfortunately, you can't stop the princess." Then Dutton immediately waved his hand. A few soldiers stepped forward and held Xuan Nai up. Although Xuan Nai was weak, she still struggled desperately. Unfortunately, just as Dutton said, without mana, Xuan Nai was just an ordinary girl. There was no way she could fight against a group of men, let alone break free from the restraint of a few soldiers. Under such circumstances, Xuan Nai could only watch as Emerald and the others walked to the solar eclipse gate and came to the device next to the solar eclipse gate. That person from the future used Miss Xuan Nai's key to open a part of the lock. Previously, we also used Lucy Hartfilia's key to open the rest of the lock. Now, the solar eclipse gate's lock is completely open. We can open the gate at any time. Emerald stared at the device in front of her. Then, she turned her head and looked at Dutton. "How's the preparation going?" "The whole city has entered the highest level of alert. We have also arranged for people to go to the border to monitor. If the dragons appear, we will be able to get the news immediately," Dutton replied. In addition, the soldiers have also begun to evacuate the residents of the city. The magic shooters who came to participate in the Great Demon Battle Exhibition are being summoned. They have already gathered in the central square of Coloches. "Very good," Emerald nodded. "After the dragons appear, we will immediately fire the eclipse cannons to destroy the dragons. However, no matter what, there are 10,000 of them. By then, there will definitely be some survivors. We need the power of the magic shooters to fight against the dragons. We must not neglect them." "I understand." Dutton pondered for a moment, then glanced at the struggling Xuan Nai. However, that starling magic shooter seems to have agreed to Noah Doria's request to stop us from opening the gate. Should we treat Noah Doria and Fairy Tale as enemies? "We must not do that," Emerald hurriedly said. "Although I don't know what's going on, that Lord's power is much greater than that of an ordinary person. He will be our trump card to destroy the remaining dragons. Moreover, there are many powerful magic shooters in Fairy Tale. We cannot lose this powerful force." However, Noah Doria asked Xuan Nai Agulia to stop the gate from opening. "Does this mean that he intends to make an enemy of the kingdom?" Dutton frowned. "When the time comes, what if he helps the dragons to fight against the kingdom? That lord may not know the true purpose of the Eclipse Project, nor does he know that 10,000 dragons are about to attack. Perhaps, like you, he thinks that we intend to use the eclipse to change history. That's why he wants to stop us." Emerald looked at Dutton seriously. "Could it be that you, who did the same thing as that lord, also intend to help the dragons to fight against the kingdom?" Dutton was speechless. "You can't be too presumptuous." Emerald raised her head and looked at the eclipse gate. "I don't think that Lord has any ill intentions towards us. Although he is different from us and possesses great power, he is still a human. He wouldn't just watch the dragons destroy our country and destroy this world. Your Highness is right, Dutton said helplessly. Then what should we do now? Hearing this, Fei closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened her eyes again, her eyes were full of determination. Emerald then ordered, "Open it." The Eclipse Gate. Emerald reached out and grabbed the handle of the device in front of her. She twisted it and turned it on. Gotcha! On the magnificent gate, called the Eclipse Gate, there was a clear sound, as if some mechanism had been activated. Under the gaze of Emerald and the others, the sun, moon, and stars imprinted on the gate began to move. Then, the gate slowly opened. Clang! As the Eclipse Gate slowly opened, a blinding light shone out from the gate. Everyone held their breaths as they looked at the light coming from behind the door, until the dazzling door was completely open. The entire place fell silent. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire ground began to tremble. What's going on? What's going on? The soldiers of the kingdom's army began to panic. Emerald and Dutton were equally shocked. They tried their best to stabilize themselves as they stood up in panic. Princess, Dutton said in panic. What's going on? Emerald was also at a loss. She looked at the gate. The next moment, Emerald's expression froze. Dong! Following the sound of heavy footsteps, a ferocious dragon claw covered in scales reached out from the Eclipse Gate and landed on the ground. Chapter 17:19. Dong! When the ferocious dragon claw reached out of the huge door called the solar eclipse and slammed into the ground, an astonishing shockwave erupted from the center of the ferocious dragon claw, sending shockwaves in all directions. That impact was simply like a terrifying typhoon above the 12th grade. It was like an explosion, causing the entire ground to be shaken until cracks spread out like a spiderweb. The armed soldiers were all blown away by the shockwave amidst a series of cries and cries of agony. They were like pieces of trash as they were blasted away in an extremely clean manner. Xuanai, who was restrained by a group of soldiers, didn't even have time to react before the soldiers who were tightly restraining her were also sent flying. Instead, Xuanai broke free from her restraints and laid on the ground. As if she was in a typhoon, she was blown so hard that she couldn't even open her eyes. Because Jade was lying on the ground, she was able to avoid being blown away. But she could not close her eyes. She stared in the direction of the Eclipse Gate. Her eyes were full of shock. Under such circumstances, the ferocious dragon claw was raised once again, and its owner slowly walked out of the door. Not long after, everyone present, including Emerald, UNI, Dutton, and the soldiers who were blown away by the wind, saw it. A giant dragon walked out of the huge door called Solar Eclipse. In front of the shocked eyes of Fei and the others, the giant dragon that came out of the Solar Eclipse Gate opened its pair of scarlet eyes. It raised its huge head and roared towards the sky. Roar, roar, roar. The deafening roar was like the sound of a bell announcing the end of this era. It turned into a sound wave that was loud enough to form a clear echo. It was like a substantial shock wave that erupted once again. At the same time, all the sorcerers and colokas who were still in the city clearly heard the draconic roar that resounded across the sky. At that moment, the magic shooters from guilds all over the kingdom turned their heads and looked towards the source of the dragon's roar, which was the direction of the palace. Then everyone saw this scene. They saw huge black shadows flapping their wings that seemed to be able to blot out the sun. They rode the wind and flew into the sky one after another. Moreover, as time passed, more and more huge black shadows soared into the sky from the palace. In the end, there were so many of them that they could form a wave. Until a certain moment, the huge black shadows that soared into the sky from the palace finally stopped appearing. However, the huge black shadows were so many that they filled the entire sky. In the next second, the huge black shadows roared towards the sky. Roar, roar, roar. An extremely terrifying roar transformed into a tangible sound wave that poured down from the sky. Like a tidal wave, it surged towards all of Coloca's from all directions. At this moment, under the terrifying sound waves, the buildings began to shake and crumble. At this moment, the ground began to tremor under the terrifying sound wave. At this moment, under the terrifying sound wave, the magic shooters covered their ears and screamed. At this moment, under the terrifying sound wave, the magic shooters and Coloca's all felt an indescribable chill in their hearts. Thus the disaster began. Under everyone's gazes, the dragons that filled the entire sky all spat out breaths that carried various attributes, but also contained terrifying power toward the city that was called the City of Flowers. Bam! 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 The dragon's breath that descended from the sky landed on the buildings one after another, completely destroying them, setting off bursts of flames and setting off waves of impact. Amidst the continuous sounds of explosions, ruins were created one after another. In just a split second, the entire Coloca's turned into a sea of fire. The high mages that had been thrown to the ground by that frightening burst of wind looked at Crocus, who had been perfectly fine a second ago, but now suddenly turned into a sea of flames. It was as if they had lost their souls, and they couldn't react. In the palace that was surrounded by waves of fire, Emerald knelt on the ground and looked at the ferocious dragons that filled the entire sky. She seemed to be in a daze as tears flowed down her cheeks. Seeing this, a huge question in Emerald's heart was finally answered. Why would the dragons, which were almost extinct 400 years ago, gather in groups of 10,000 to attack the kingdom of Fiori and rule the world 400 years later? The reason was simple. It was because the dragons that attacked did not belong to this era. They came here from another era through the Eclipse Gate. 400 years ago, the dragon clans still ruled the world, and Aconorolia had yet to appear. In other words, the purpose of the future person who advised Emerald was not to use the mana collected by the Eclipse as a cannon to destroy 10,000 dragons. The real purpose of the future Rog was to borrow the power of the Eclipse to summon 10,000 dragons from 400 years ago. However, it was unrealistic for the future Rog to gather all the mana to activate the Eclipse by himself. Therefore, the future Rog used Emerald to get the kingdom to collect the mana for him. This is the real Eclipse project, the Eclipse project that belongs to me. After saying these words, the future Roger slowly walked out of the sea of fire and arrived in front of Fetsue, who had tears streaming down her face. Looking at the group of 10,000 giant dragons that blotted out the sky, Roger grinned and finally laughed out loud. Now, the Eclipse project that belongs to me is finally completed. A total of 10,000 dragons will be under my command. I will become the true Dragon King and rule this world. Emerald clenched her fists and stared at the future Rog with eyes full of anger and hatred. She squeezed out a voice with difficulty. What is your purpose? The future Rog suddenly smiled. His smile looked abnormally evil under the illumination of the fire. Then, the future Rog opened his mouth. I've said it before. In my era, the world was dominated by dragons. However, that didn't refer to a group of dragons formed by 10,000 dragons. Instead, it referred to the Dragon King who had once slaughtered the entire dragon race and was born from the blood of dragons Aconorolia. Emerald was shocked. Aconolia? The dragon that ruled the world in the future was not the 10,000 dragons, but the black dragon that was recorded in the Revelation. This is the truth. The future Rog narrowed his eyes. 7 years later, the world will be ruled by the Dragon King that exists only for slaughter and destruction. People will live in fear every day. In that kind of world, there is only despair and pain left. In order to escape from Aconolia's control, I created a secret technique that can control dragons, which is the so-called dragon control magic. The future Rog clenched his teeth and said with hatred. However, I don't know if it's because Aconolia's nature is human, or if it's because he's too powerful. My dragon control magic has no effect on him. In the end, I could only escape from the era of Aconolia's control and come up with a plan. The Eclipse doesn't have the effect of a cannon. It's just a door that connects to time. The future Rog smiled as if he had gotten his way. Originally, by adjusting the time, we could enter the flow of time at will and go to any designated era. However, on the night of the eclipse before the 7th of July, this door will only connect to one era. Connect to 400 years ago, when the dragon race still existed, and summon all 10,000 dragons from the past. The future Logue spread his arms, and with the huge group of dragons as the background, he raised his head and laughed loudly. Next, I will use my dragon control magic to control the group of dragons and challenge Akinalia. At that time, I will become the new Dragon King and rule this world. After saying that, the future Ra grinned and raised his hand. His hand fluctuated with a black mist. Your Highness, thank you for helping me so much, but you're already useless. Rest in peace and die. As soon as he finished speaking, the black fog in his hand suddenly exploded and turned into a black arrow. Like a bullet, it violently shot towards Emerald, who was kneeling on the ground. Emerald just stared blankly at this scene and didn't even think of resisting. At this moment, a black shadow appeared in front of Fei Chui and gently waved his hand at the black arrow that was coming towards her. Bang! The black arrow that could pierce through a human body was directly smacked away, turning into bits of black mist and disappearing. Your plan is quite thorough. A voice gradually sounded. I just don't know. Have you ever thought about how those 10,000 dragons will die? Chapter 17:20. Huff, 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 huff. In the sky, the sound of giant dragons flapping their wings reverberated clearly in the surroundings, incessantly lingering in the ears. In the blazing sea of fire, the future rogue stared at Noah, who had suddenly appeared without any warning. He couldn't help but gasp in shock. So you came after all? Noah Dole. Noah didn't care about the future rogue. He first glanced at Jade, who was sitting on the ground, paralyzed. She had yet to recover from the shock of being used. Then he looked at the person in his arms. In Noah's arms was Xuanai, who was still in a state of shock. She looked at the giant dragons in the sky for a long time, unable to recover from her shock. Clearly, Xuanai didn't expect that the so-called 10,000 giant dragons had actually come from the space-time gate called the solar eclipse. They had come from 400 years ago to this world. Looking at Xuanai, Noah spoke softly. Where's future Lucy? Lord Noah. Xuanai finally reacted and answered truthfully. Future Lucy isn't with me. When we were guarding the solar eclipse, we found out that future Lucy was imprisoned by the kingdom. Hence, future Lucy went to save Lady Lucy. Is that so? Noah nodded calmly and helped Xuanai up from his arms. He protected her behind his back and looked straight ahead. If that's the case, Xuanai, take that princess over there and leave this place together. Find your companions from the guild and move with them. Then what about Lord Noah? Xuanai quickly asked. What about Lord Noah? Me? Noah curled his lips into a smile and said without turning his head. I'll stay. You don't have to worry about me. Xuanai opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. However, before she could finish, she was interrupted by the future rogue. Leave? The future rogue sneered. No, none of you can leave. As he finished, the future rogue raised his hand. Roar! In the sky, one of the huge dragons suddenly roared and turned into an arrow that was shot from a bow. It swooped down, bringing with it a whistling atmosphere and a strong wind. It was like a huge meteorite that rushed towards Noah. Lord Noah, Xuanai cried out in surprise. However, Noah merely coldly stared at the enormous dragon that was charging down from the sky toward him with an extremely powerful momentum. He clenched his hand into a fist. Wong. Magic patterns that looked like electric wires crawled up Noah's arm. After being strengthened by magic and the endless magical power provided by the third perpetual motion mechanism, at this moment, a terrifying power surged into Noah's arm. Bang! With a loud explosion, Noah soared into the sky and punched the chest of the huge dragon that was swooping down. Dong! When Noah's fist landed on the huge dragon's chest, a loud, heavy sound that sounded like a bell rang in the air. Then, the huge dragon that was swooping down with a huge momentum was blasted away. It turned into a cannonball and flew back at a speed faster than when it came, crashing heavily into a building. The huge building was smashed into pieces by the huge dragon and turned into rubble. The huge dragon was buried in the rubble and could no longer be seen. The future rogue's expression froze on his face. Shue Nai covered her mouth, and her eyes were filled with surprise. Even Jade, who had been sitting on the ground, widened her eyes and looked at Noah, who was slowly descending from the sky and standing firmly on the ground. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Not to mention these people, even the dragons in the sky had completely stopped roaring. For a moment, they actually stopped moving. Under such circumstances, Noah raised his eyes and looked at the future rogue and said sarcastically, "If you summoned a god, then maybe I would have to worry. But you summoned a group of dragons that will sooner or later die in the hands of a Conarolia. You want to kill me? Even if you summon 10,000 more, it won't be enough." After saying that, Noah ignored the future rogue's furious expression and glanced at Shuenai. "Hurry up and take the princess away. Shuenai, otherwise, once I fight with all my strength, you will be affected." Shuenai was startled and quickly nodded. At this time, Jade's eyes were also filled with hope. "Please save this country, Sir Noah." Jade seemed to be grabbing onto the last life-saving straw. She crawled behind Noah and grabbed Noah's clothes and shouted with hope, "Now, only you have a way to save this country." Noah turned his head and looked at Jade's tear-stained eyes that were filled with hope. After a while, he nodded. "I will do my best." Faitsue bit her lips and held back her tears. She buried the endless gratitude in her heart and stood up with difficulty. Shuenai immediately supported Jade, but her eyes remained on Noah and whispered, "Sir Noah, please be careful." After leaving this sentence, Shuenai supported Jade and walked towards the center of Coloches. This time, the future rogue didn't stop Shuenai and Jade, but only stared at Noah. Only the huge group of dragons in the sky looked at the gradually leaving Shuenai and Jade, and more or less became restless. Looking at the restless group of dragons, Noah raised his eyebrows and said to the future rogue with a faint smile, "It seems that with your strength, even if you have magic that can control dragons, you still can't completely control a group of 10,000 dragons." "I don't need to completely control the group of dragons." The future rogue's face darkened and said coldly, "I only need to let them destroy and give them a target. That's enough. It's because of this forced method that you're able to keep 10,000 dragons here, right?" Noah pursed his lips. "If you want the dragons to completely obey your orders, with your ability, you can only control a dozen of them. Being able to control a dozen of them at once is enough." The future rogue smiled calmly. "As for you, can you really deal with 10,000 dragons on your own?" As he said this, a surge of mana surged from his body. The mana turned into an invisible network that connected to the dragons in the sky, causing them to roar at Noah. The sound waves shook Noah's robes and made Noah's robes flutter. Against the surging sound waves, Noah's eyes flashed slightly. With Noah's superb perception ability, he could completely sense it. In the sky, among the huge group of dragons, although the auras of the dragons were very powerful, they were uneven. Among the group of dragons, the strongest could probably reach the top of the 5 digits, comparable to the gods in the box. However, the weakest ones were probably at the bottom of the 5 digits, comparable to the 10 great Saint Magi. Although they were all in the 5 digits, the gap was just that big. However, just now, when Noah sent the dragon flying with a punch that reached the level of a god, he discovered that the dragon's scales were abnormally hard. With the strength of the dragon's scales, there was probably no human archmage who could cause damage to them, unless they were like Naz, Gadjaloo, and Windy, who specialized in dragon-slaying magic. It's a pity that they're only in the 5 digits and can't pose a threat. At some point, a silver dagger appeared in Noah's hand. "Aster, if it's you, you should be able to easily cut off those dragon scales, right?" "Of course." Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind. I'm Master's sword. As long as Master swings his sword, there's nothing that Master can't cut open. Hearing this, Noah suddenly smiled and chanted softly. Cold Steel Queen, the holy sword that slays demons and demons, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power. A dazzling white light bloomed from the silver dagger, instantly illuminating the entire night sky. Looking at the dazzling radiance, Future Logue abruptly ordered, "All of you go." In the sky, the huge group of dragons roared and rushed down, covering the sky and covering the earth towards the dazzling white light. The battle was about to start. Chapter 17:21. Thud, thud, thud. Rubble fell from the ruined buildings from time to time, smashing into the ground, causing a series of crisp sounds. The surrounding buildings were on fire, and the streets were filled with a sea of fire. Xuanai held on to Emerald and rushed towards the center of Crocus as fast as she could. Roar, 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 roar. In the sky, deafening dragon roars continued to resound, causing waves of sound to blow into the sea of fire, fanning the flames. Xuanai held onto Emerald while braving the surrounding fire and wind. She lifted her head and looked up at the sky. In the sky, several giant dragons were constantly circling back and forth, breathing scorching hot breaths at the buildings below, destroying the city. Future Logue's dragon mastery magic could not control the large number of dragons in the end. Even though he forced most of the dragons to stay at the palace and hold the fort, there were still some that broke away and completely ignored Future Logue's orders, wreaking havoc in Crocus. The 10,000 dragons that the Future Logue had summoned from the era of 400 years ago were probably all dragons that viewed humans as food and livestock, and were against the idea of living together with humans. Therefore, these dragons did not hesitate to destroy this city that was filled with the aura of humans. There was no mercy at all. Under such circumstances, Crocus was constantly being destroyed by the dragon's breaths. Fortunately, Emerald had asked the soldiers of the royal army to evacuate the ordinary citizens in the city before opening the eclipse portal. Otherwise, there would have been a great number of casualties. Emerald's heart was tormented by guilt as she watched the surrounding buildings being destroyed by the dragon's breaths, and Crocus, which was located in the palace, gradually being destroyed. All of this was his fault for opening the solar eclipse door. This sentence echoed in Emerald's heart as she suffered from the torment of guilt. At this moment, a dragon's breath descended from the sky and landed heavily on a building next to Xuanai and Emerald. Boom! The scorching breath blew up the building in an instant, stirring up thick flames and explosive winds, causing rubble and debris to splatter in all directions. Caught off guard, Xuanai and Fei Chui were thrown to the ground by the impact of the blast. They let out a cry of surprise. "Princess!" Xuanai struggled to get up and supported Fei Chui, who was beside her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Fei Chui shook her head and looked at the snow. "Miss Xuanai, please don't bother with me and quickly run away." "No." Xuanai rejected without hesitation. "How can I abandon the princess?" "But I am the one who attracted the dragons. I am the one who caused this country, and even the world, to face the threat of 10,000 dragons." Emerald said in grief, "My sins are heavy enough. Even if I die here, I won't be able to make up for it. If you die to save me, I won't be able to face Lord Noah, who is fighting for this country. So, even if you're alone, please leave quickly." "Princess, you were only used. You didn't do anything wrong. Xuanai didn't compromise. Moreover, the one who asked me to bring you to a safe place is Lord Noah. If I abandon you here, I won't be able to face Lord Noah. Please leave with me." After saying that, Xuanai forcefully helped Fei Chui up. Without any other choice, Fei Chui could only let Xuanai do as she pleased. However, in the next moment, Fei Chui caught a glimpse of the scene above. Her pretty face changed abruptly, and she shouted, "Run!" Before Xuanai could react, A wave of shocking wind fell from the sky and hit the place where Xuanai and Fei Chui were, extinguishing the surrounding flames. Immediately, Xuanai hurriedly raised her head and looked at the sky. There, a huge dragon slowly descended. Its eyes stared at Xuanai and Fei Chui, flashing a playful light. Being stared at by those eyes, Xuanai and Fei Chui felt their bodies become cold. They couldn't even move. Soon after, the giant dragon slowly opened its mouth. Inside, a surge of flames was surging and compressing continuously. Just as the huge dragon's flame breath was about to land on Xuanai and Fei Cui's body, a dazzling lightning suddenly shot out and swept across the sky. With an extremely fast speed, it suddenly landed on the huge dragon's body. Bang! The dazzling lightning directly hit the huge dragon's head, causing a burst of thick blood to sputter out. Like a splash of water, it sprinkled all around. Rumble! The huge dragon, whose entire head was blown away, fell to the ground and gradually lost its vitality. Looking at this scene, Xuanai and Fei Chui were stunned on the spot. However, an indifferent voice immediately woke them up. Don't be in a daze there. Hurry up and leave. Xuanai and Fei Chui were shocked. They subconsciously turned their heads and looked at the source of the voice. In the surging sea of flames, a petite figure was suspended in the air. The silver hair was as dazzling as the moonlight. The snake-like eyes were very coquettish. A quiet and noble temperament pervaded the petite figure. That scene was like the arrival of a goddess, so beautiful that it made people speechless. You, Xuanai said with some hesitation. You are. I'm just following my master's orders to protect you, Athena said calmly. So, don't be in a daze there. Hurry up and leave here to meet up with your companions. Xuanai and Fei Chui looked at each other. Knowing that now was not the time to get to the bottom of it, they nodded in unison and continued to rush to their destination. Athena turned her head and looked in the direction of the palace. An inexplicable brilliance flashed in her coquettish snake eyes. You are my fated person. A mere dragon group naturally can't do anything to you, but you have to be careful. Saying this, Athena closed her eyes. There is two very evil and dark auras approaching. You may have to spend some effort to deal with them. Clang! In the sky above the palace, the dazzling silver light was like a shining sun, constantly gushing out from the dragon group, dyeing the surrounding sea of flames into another color. Huh! In the center of the dazzling white light, Noah roared. The demon slayer in his hand drew a cold arc of light, like moonlight, sweeping across the surroundings. Ultimate sword technique. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. The moonlight slash swept across the space, and like an arc, it suddenly appeared. In the sudden appearance of the moonlight, a roaring dragon that was rushing towards Noah's direction had just touched a little, and a white line immediately appeared on the part of its body that came into contact with the moonlight. Poochie. The moment the white line appeared, the dragon's body immediately followed the white line and directly broke into 2 halves, along with a large amount of blood, falling from the sky. And it was not only that one dragon that came into contact with the moonlight slash. Poochie, poochie, poochie. Accompanied by a series of ripping sounds, the giant dragons were all cut in half, bringing bursts of blood with them as they rained down from the sky. Apart from the dragon slayer magic, no other sorcerer could break through the scales, but under the elven magic equipment called the Demon Slayer, it was as fragile as a piece of paper. Holding such a terrifying holy sword in his hand, Noah continued to charge into the group of dragons, killing them one after another. His whole body was bathed in dragon blood. His figure was like a ghost. On the ground, future Logue, who was watching the scene with his own eyes, shouted, "Don't go near him. Use your breath. Use long-range attacks." Receiving future Logue's order, the dragons surrounding Noah suddenly opened their ferocious, beastly mouths, gathering a wave of magic. In the next moment, the dragon's breath shot towards Noah's direction, landing on his body. The powerful breath exploded on Noah's location, turning into a burst of fire, vibrating in the air. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.